Well, hello. Happy Monday, guys. Well, I'm super excited to have a couple characters that have been on my channel before. You may remember them. Of course, we have the incomparable Deb Fillman, educator, homeschool advocate, the protagonist at The Reason We Learn on YouTube and locals. We also have Justice Graves, who is got himself elected to school committee and then turned into an anarchist within about 4 months of being elected to school committee. Um, Justice is also on locals and also has his own. Justice like no, but no. The reason I wanted to bring both Deb and Justice here today is that the three of us, have been talking behind the scenes for a while, and we wanted to have a conversation about just some highly practical things that people need to know when they're approaching their child's school about CRT or other. If you want to approach your child's school about anything, really, you have to know how the school works and the correct avenues to go through, because sadly, a lot of people are giving out a lot of really bad advice, and it's leading to parents doing things that might feel good, might go viral on the internet, but doesn't actually accomplish much of anything. And at the end of the day, I have to think that the reason we're having parents scream at school board meetings is because they want to actually accomplish something, and they just think that that's the best route to go, when in fact, there may be other things that you need to do. So welcome, Deb. Welcome, Justice. I encourage everyone to subscribe to both of their YouTube channels, join both their locals, join mine too while you're at it. All of our information is in the description. But I just kind of I want to just jump right into things. We're going to keep this rather informal. Justice, I've been talking with you about this for a while. You were so excited. You got elected to school committee. We were all so proud of you. And you lasted about 4 months, and you resigned because you just couldn't take it anymore. So kick us off here. What are some things that you learned being on school committee that you think people need to understand?
I think what people need to understand is that school committees, and you've been saying on your channel for a while now, do not control curriculum. Now, there's a few exceptions. Vermont is one of them. Connecticut's one of them. There's some special municipalities, but overall, people need to understand that you are literally barking up the wrong tree. You're trying to tell a group of people who have no idea what you're talking about what your concerns are on a particular issue that, by the way, the agent in the classroom that is teaching these awful ideas is the teacher. Okay, you can change out your school board as much as you want. You can change up the curriculum as much as you want. But here's the problem, are the teachers. Those activist teachers and those activist administrators know exactly what they're doing. They want to do it. They want to do it the way they want to do it. And they have signed pledges saying that they don't care in states where they can't regulate them anyway. New Hampshire was one of them. It's a great example at the beginning when HB 544 was on the table. They signed a huge pledge. We're going to teach it no matter what. And we don't care what the state legislature does. Well, guess what happened? It didn't matter anyway. It literally didn't matter. It was never going to stop them. So it's just, people need to understand right off the gate, we are talking about the people who are the problem are the agents teaching this, that are getting in your children's heads. If we're talking about social emotional learning, that is where it comes down to. As a school committee member, I don't get to just walk around in a school building and say, oh, how's it all going? No, that's not the rules. That's not how it works.
And you don't get to just pull a teacher out either and fire them
right now. No, you can't do that. That's done through the superintendent's office. The superintendent's got to call them up and be like, hey, you're doing something wrong. I'm going to make the firing decision. That's how that works. That's how their contract works.
Right.
So that's my little rant just to start off this conversation.
Well, and I'll pick it up there and say that because, there will be people who say, but they do make staffing decisions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good, Deb. You're good. Okay. Justice is a touch delayed. That's okay. We're going to work it out.
Okay. So some people have said to me, yes, but they do make staffing decisions, and to which I say, the staffing decision they're most responsible for is the superintendent. If you go ahead and you manage to find just cause to bring to them a request to fire the superintendent, and good luck with that, okay? Because they have a contract too. It's going to cost them a lot to fire the superintendent. It's not a small thing. You better bring it, and they better have violated some term of their contract. It's not because the superintendent's committed to wokeness, we got to fire him. This is probably not going to work. Because remember, the case law says the state can teach your kids pretty much anything they want if it's not explicitly religion. I mean, it's really that much. Most parents don't realize that it is state-run school. It is, they have that right to teach. They don't have complete freedom of speech. Like I said, they can't compel you to profess things you don't believe. They can't compel you to pledge allegiance to the flag. So they can't make you say things, even though all speech in a classroom is theoretically compelled speech, right? Do the test and write the paper. But they can't compel you to violate your deeply held beliefs or your values, or say things that go against who you are, or even that incriminate you. That they can't do, because you still, as a student, the student has civil rights. But the superintendent, to just fire a superintendent, is not some small thing because you don't like a book or curriculum or even a worldview. Can't do that. The superintendent hires principals, the principals hire teachers, and so on. And the cost to fire them is really high. And school boards are in charge of money. And the other thing that Justice will back me up on this is that they do their budgeting. It's all like omnibus, right? So you can go in and say, don't spend money on this book, or don't spend money on this diversity training thingy, right? And even if they say we're going to cut your funding by that amount of dollars, they can't line item it. They can't go in and say, don't spend on this little thing. It's going to come out of the budget. And if the principal, the superintendent, the teachers want to go, okay, you know what we're going to cut? We're going to cut that thing you like, and we're going to use this money for the thing you don't like. So they can still play with that. The only thing they can't do is not pay the teachers. Okay, so they do, if you can defund them by a huge amount of money, some other kind of way, that's a problem. But, because they have to pay the teachers and they want to have extra for this garbage. But the amount of what it costs to buy some filthy pornographic book is pennies compared to the total budget. But the offices that do have some control, not over curriculum, but over these budgets and over things at a level where you can kind of do things a little differently, or be maybe your county commission, your city council. These kind of people have a little bit different pull. Your legislators don't have open meeting rules like school boards. They can actually talk amongst themselves and build coalitions and fight things at the board level and so forth. Now, why is that important? That's important because the teachers, even if you fired them all tomorrow, are just going to be replaced by teachers educated in the same damn schools by the same damn people with the same crappy curriculum ideas and pedagogy and so forth. So what you really need to do, and here's the other problem, parents, I'm so sorry to say it's going to take like over a decade for this to even make a difference.
Yep.
Even if today you totally cleared house and replaced your state board of education, and they were all 100% anti-woke, and you had a new governor, and you had a new commissioner of education, everybody's new. You've still got your state university, and not just your state, all the other states and all the other colleges educating teachers, because they go out across the land. We don't have borders that go, you can't come here to teach. So you'd have to change all of their ideas, and they're all in lockstep. They're like this. There's absolutely no diversity in teacher education in America. Zero. It is the most coordinated thing you've ever seen. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, how I've tried to explain this to people is almost every single public school teacher teaching today has been trained in teacher education programs where the teachers training them were indoctrinated into critical race theory. This is not a fixable problem overnight. It is not a fixable problem by firing onesies and twosies. This is a matter of training literally not only an entire new generation of teachers, an entire new generation of teacher trainers.
That's correct. So ironically, since you can't fix the whole system, the only thing you can really do, maybe, possibly, is try to work very specifically with your child's teacher. And I wish you the best of luck. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that you are now going to come up against it, and depending on their age. Now, I'll go out on a limb here. You said we could be free and say what we want to say, so I'm going to say what I'm going to say. Right now, my personal belief is if you have a child between the ages of, kindergarten and 5th grade, you do not put them in a public school, period. End of conversation. They cannot speak up for themselves. They cannot defend themselves. They cannot act in civil disobedience. Anything you try to do with regard to going in and talking to their teacher is going to fall absolutely flat, because the people who gravitate towards the lower grades, and I can say this because I was one of them, tend to be on the younger side, tend to be the ones with the least amount of experience. The newer teachers tend, it's not a given, but this is what attracts the young and idealistic ones. It's also the easiest. Let's face it, it's, teaching high school science or teaching even middle school something is more challenging, a little harder, attracts different kind of personality than you're going to see in K through 5. K through 5 is where you get more the younger, the activists, et cetera, et cetera. And what they are doing right now with these young kids is 100% abuse. And your kid can't fight back. And you have no rights. I'm sorry, you don't. You just, it's a government school, and your rights, once they cross the threshold into that school, are virtually non-existent. PPRA, it's there, but you file a complaint. John O'Brien told me the other night, he's like, good luck to you. What good is that? Your better bet is, and unfortunately it's going to be after the fact, it's only going to be after your child is traumatized, after your child comes home in tears or is a nervous wreck and doesn't know who the heck they are anymore, that you could possibly take them to a shrink, good luck finding one who's not woke, and get them diagnosed as having some kind of an issue, somehow connect the dots that it was to the teacher, good luck with that one again, and take them to court for damages and for harm and all this kind of stuff, so they'll be liable. But you're still going to have the same problem of removing them from the school. And then you're going to have to pay a lawyer. And if you don't win, if you can't win, if you can't bring the receipts, you now owe the lawyer instead of getting some nice fat settlement to pay the lawyer. So I'm not saying don't do it. If you have hard and fast evidence that your kid was psychologically messed up because of the school, by all means, bring a case. But that's going to be where you're at, is the local little, thing. You have older kids, it's a little different because your kid has a mouth and maybe a vocabulary, and maybe they can read. Hopefully, we hope. I don't know. And there are other things practically you can do, which we can talk about. But K through 5, these are babies. These are kids. I mean, I'm sorry, even a 10-year-old. No. And especially if they were in there from kindergarten and going on up, they've already been stripped of their boundaries, stripped of their ability to fight back. And SEL is the mechanism by which they deliver the critical theory. And by that point, it's too late.
Okay, I want to talk about what SEL is in a second, but I also wanted to just, kind of emphasize what you just said, Deb, in that, when we're talking about really young kids, our brain forms about who we are and how we see the world by the time we are 8 years old. Anything that is put in a child's brain by the time they are 8 years old, it is almost impossible to undo. They will go through the rest of their life seeing the world like that unless they make a proactive experience to get therapy, get coaching, do some sort of personal development. It is extremely difficult. So I just want to emphasize that point you're making, that it is about you need to do this to protect your kids at the end of the day, because you're setting them off on the wrong foot if you're putting them in public schools that early. Now let's talk about SEL.
No.
Oh, Justice, go ahead.
Well, no. I wanted to chime in just to a story that I told Deb when we went to dinner the other night about my personal experiences about why I don't trust the system, because I think it's important that people understand how what you do to your children affects them for a lifetime. I was born in 1998. So my birthday, I was 4 years old when I went into kindergarten. That is not legal according to the state standards. So I was an exemption. I had to be approved by the school committee for that to happen at that time. But what happened at that time, because my mom didn't know the rules, I got thrown into school. They wanted to unenroll me. They made my mom panic. She called, there was a call, she's crying, and she ended up deciding to engage in an act of civil disobedience with me and kept sending me to the school because she knew I wasn't unenrolled yet, and said, until this gets resolved, he is going to kindergarten. He's going. And I have very vivid memories of the testing. I have very vivid memories of, I don't think I was at the committee meetings, but I was 4. I was turning 5 at the time. And I want people to understand that for the rest of my life, I remembered that situation and remembered that my education was a gift, but also I had deep issues trusting educators and teachers because of that. I didn't trust school committees. I still don't. I did not walk into school committee as an unbiased person. I walked in as an almost throw out from kindergarten who became a school choice kid, who became a total, rebel. Now I guess we could describe, as Dr. Bia said, as an anarchist. But what I want people to understand is that just because you're putting your kindergartner in, it does not mean that they don't remember what you're doing to them. If you're having fights and stuff about this, we remember that. Like I said, I remember going to testing. I have very strong feelings. The first career path that I wanted to do when they ask you when you're in first grade and second grade, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be a teacher because I don't want to feel the way that I did back when I was in kindergarten. And that is something that people need to understand. I'm young, I'm only 23. I can remember when I was 4. This is not, when we talk about in terms of like the little ones, this where they're getting in their head and they're walking around inside of it. I want you to understand from somebody that lived through an experience that was decided by a school committee that it stays with you. It also stayed with me because there was another person in the district who had the same situation as I was, and she got rejected by the school committee. So I've lived my whole life knowing that a board decision for me let me be who I am today, but didn't let somebody else be somebody else. Mm-hmm. So you need to understand that you're going up against the government and they're not playing, and it will haunt your children. I'm sorry to say that. I don't usually talk about this story, but I need people to understand these are your babies you're putting out there. You need to be confident in what you're doing, and you need to trust your instincts. If it's a no-go, it's a no-go. If it's a go, you go. But you have to make the choice of all in or all out. There's no in between in this. And I think that's a good segue into how SEL screws up your kids' heads.
I want to talk about that in a second, but Justice, you just made me think of a separate question that I want to ask to the both of you. Do you think that parents should trust that their children's teachers are approaching this situation from a place of partnership with the parents, or should parents view the teachers as adversaries?
No.
Well, I would say
adversaries.
I would say adversarial, but the problem is, if you are one of those families where it is just, you've tried every possible thing and you can't envision a solution where your child doesn't have to be there, it obviously isn't going to help you to approach them adversarially. Just understand in your mind that this person is absolutely, I don't care how nice they look. Jason Littlefield uses a picture in his presentations about social emotional learning of Bob Ross. Like the nicest, sweetest face, right? And he has a picture of Bob Ross, but instead of a paintbrush painting little trees, he has a drill. And he has a drill and a wall. And and he said, what you need to understand is it's not about the person wielding the tool. It's the fact that they're using tools that are designed for destruction. And so you have to set aside that this person's like, hey, it's so nice to meet you. And we're so happy to have you in our class. And what's your favorite color? And like, they look and you want so badly. It's cognitive dissonance, right? You're like, they seem really sweet. And like, I'm sure they don't mean any harm. And guess what? They don't. They don't mean harm. They're just really, really wrong.
They don't know what they're doing.
They too have been brainwashed. First of all, most of them are products of this very same system. Before they even went to education school, they were products of this system because this has been going on for at least 30 years. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse, and because they're coming down younger. So the kids, the people who are now teaching in these schools, went through this process. They don't think this is wrong. They've not had any challenge to it. And if you were to challenge them, it might well be the first person they've ever met who's challenging it. And you're going to sound like a loon. They're going to be like, what? And you're also, in theory, if you say, well, I think this is harmful, it's going to hurt them. Think about it. They're going to be like, I wouldn't hurt your why would you say that to me? So you have to decide, do I want to have these kinds of conversations with somebody who, doesn't look mean, doesn't sound mean, doesn't believe they're being mean. They 100% believe they're being a nice person. And I think what they're doing is wielding a drill to my kid's head. That's not going to be a great conversation. Yeah. There's no way to really have, even in a polite way, that conversation about your young child. So the only way, now, if you keep your kid home through 5th grade and do all the right things, now I personally still wouldn't put them in school after that. I'd find other solutions. But if you had to at some point, chances are they'd be better able to defend themselves and better able to withstand the little things that are going to happen, which they're still going to suck, but they won't be already broken. Okay, they might still break, but if you're there and you know what's going to happen and you know what's going on and you can kind of intercede and supplement and do things with a kid who can already read, already do math, and already knows the scientific method and how to think properly a little bit, they're leaps and bounds ahead of the kids who've been psychologically raped by social emotional learning. And that is exactly what it is. That is exactly what it is. They strip them naked, psychologically and emotionally. And then when they're completely stripped down, they build them back up in the new image of how they want them to see themselves, how they want them to think of the world and see other people and interact with other people. And I don't know how you fix that. Wouldn't even know how to begin to fix that after that.
So let's talk. Justice, do you have anything to add there?
I think the only thing I want to hammer home is that people need to understand, and Deb touched on this, is that the system is working as designed. Stop calling these people, no offense, there's some good ones in the bunch, like Frank McCormick, but stop calling these people teachers. They're government employees. They're pushing a government-funded agenda. I mean, it is. We know this. We've talked about it with, House Resolution 400 and 1814. It's a funded agenda. It is working as designed. And if you're panicking about it, that is because you understand that this is not appropriate and that this is very, very, very much, it feels, if you feel like we're in 1984, it's because we are in 1984, ladies and gentlemen. Think of the government as Big Brother. That's what we're dealing with today. That is the perfect understanding, but that's my thoughts on it. That's
100%.
And I just want to mention Frank McCormick will actually be on this channel on Thursday at 5:00. So we're going to get to hear from him. I'm really excited about that. I also just want to acknowledge Jacqueline in the chat said, how about cameras in all public schools for remote viewing for parents to zoom in? If only someone in this video right now had actually come up with that idea.
Well, can I say something about that? Because I'm the fly in the ointment there. Right to record is what you want. You do not want the government owning footage of your child. You do not want the government recording your child and owning that stuff. So, and since it will never be you will never get the right to record, own that equipment. That's not happening. What you have to fight for is the right for your child to record. And even if they're a young child, the right to fit them with a spy cam or whatever. And by the way, if you really wanted to, you could already.
Yeah, get your kids a little pin spy cam.
It's the tragedy of it is, think about this, parents. Do you really want to do? There was a dad who knew his daughter was being abused, his special needs daughter. Something was happening. He put one in her braid in her hair, so it could record the sounds of everything. And I mean, that was the only way they caught the teacher. But who wants to be that? That falls under the category of, if you're already snooping in your boyfriend's phone and email, that's your clue to break up with him. Before you even find anything. Why are you snooping? You do not have a trusting relationship. So why would you send your child into a place where you're like, if only we had cameras in the room to watch every person's move and listen to every word they say? Then you're like, maybe we need to reevaluate this entire choice, right? And people say, well, very easy for you to say because you didn't have to blah, blah, blah. No, it's not easy for me to say at all. I ordered my entire life around not doing that. And it was not easy. It's still not easy. But you just have to stop and say, which is harder? Which is harder? Worrying and wondering and rebuilding a broken child, which is almost impossible, or maybe putting my life back together?
Yeah. I think that people really, and I promise you we're going to get into social emotional learning in a sec, but I really think that people are not grasping the severity of the situation. And when I hear parents making excuses, that's easy for you to say, or I have a job, I can't do that. It's then I'm sorry. Why did you have kids in the first place? Is kind of how I feel about it. Why did you have kids in the first place if your number one priority in life is not making sure that those kids grow up to be well-adjusted, emotionally human beings? Right? Because that's not what's going to happen in the schools. When you send them to the public schools right now, their job is to indoctrinate these children into their ideology. It's not to teach them how to read and write or do math. They're not even teaching them how to do math anymore. They're having them do interpretive song and dance about their feelings about math, as though that's going to teach them calculus in some strange universe. But I don't understand why more parents aren't taking this seriously. Now, we can see a lot of progress. We can see the stuff that Corey DeAngelis puts out all the time with the amount of parents that are pulling their kids out of public school, the amount of parents that are taking homeschool more seriously. We can see the amount of charter schools popping up. I think some of those charter schools are good, and I think some of them are bad. And you have to be the best judge of where they fall. But why do you guys think, and Justice, I want to start with you, what do you think is the barrier to preventing more parents from, frankly, listening to this good advice that you guys are giving?
I think the barrier is themselves. I think, and we had a good conversation. I had I met up with Deb and we had a nice dinner a few days ago. And I think a lot of them, because they grew up in the same system that we're talking about, right? It may have taken 40 years for it to get to this particular point, but they've also been taught at a very subconscious level that the government can fix my problem, that somebody else can fix my problem, that an outside agent external to my being can save my problem. But here's the issue, that we are all in control of our own destinies. There is no Superman. I don't want to say be your own Superman, because that sort of defeats the conversational point here. It's you have to be a strong individual and stand up and say no. Can you have codependency on some people in certain situations? Sure. But you need to be able to understand what that relationship is. And I think a lot of parents don't understand their relationship with the public school system. They think, I give my child over to Mrs. So-and-so, and Mrs. So-and-so is going to take care of them. They're not going to do it. They don't understand, like what I was talking about before, that teachers are agents of the state. They're government employees. They have to follow a set rubric. Speaking of rubrics, we talked about, I believe earlier in this, we talked about, firing a superintendent. Well, all superintendents come from the same place, but all of them also come with rubrics attached to them when school committees evaluate them. I know that the Massachusetts one has all this stuff in it that we're talking about, the critical theories, the culturally responsive, I don't think it has the SEL in it. That's more relatively new, but they're coming from that same bad pocket. You can't, and somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, why can't you just train up a superintendent that's not going to do this stuff and then bring them in and, redo a school board and blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, that's called domination. In legal terms, I don't know legal terms, but in ethics terms, that's called dominating the board, and that's illegal. Second, all votes for who you have as a superintendent are done in open session. You can do pre-screening in a private session, but that's about it. And third, you have to comply with state standards. If your superintendent does not comply with state standards, or if your school committee is lying to the state if they comply with state standards, your school is going to not be accredited. Which is another part that people need to understand, is that, accreditation works in different ways, but that's one of the ways that they'll go after you. Or the Board of Education at your state level will do what it has the power to do. It'll totally walk over your board and do whatever the heck it wants in your school district. And I asked the parents of Massachusetts, you don't trust DESE right now. How comfortable would you be if they just walked into your building and started telling you how to spend your money and where it was going to go? Because these state boards don't care about your kids. One of the things I keep hearing from state to state to state with the people I talk to is that the state boards of education, they make all these fun, crazy declarations. They do the masking mandates, they do whatever, but they don't care at all. They're very hands off, and they know that education's too big to fail. And so they know that you'll just support it anyway, even if they screw it up. Yep. So you need to understand that.
Exactly. And I want to read a couple of things to you guys, because it really might shock people into an awareness of what he's saying. All right. So what some people know, but not everyone, is that our system came from Prussia. The system of education we have was adopted to copy the Prussian model back at about 1836 or so. Okay. And there was a guy in Ohio. He was a leading education reformer. He hailed the Prussian system of compulsory education in his book, The Prussian System, blah, blah, blah. And then we adopted the model. Well, here's what they thought that was for. The German school, they liked this, must fashion the student and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than you wish him to will. Okay. That was
Wow.
okay. So that's what that was. And then, so they Americanized it a little bit, but even so, Edward Ross, who was a prominent American sociologist back in the day, an education theorist, said that the purpose of education, public education, was to collect little plastic lumps of human dough from private households and shape them on the social kneading board. That's a direct quote. There's a source if anyone wants it. And then the goal of government schools is, this is in an article that I'm reading, is not to serve children by teaching them to think and acquire important knowledge, but to serve the state by forcing children to conform to its will. The U.S. Bureau of Education made the point clear in 1914. Quote, the public school exists primarily for the benefit of the state rather than for the benefit of the individual. More recently, William H. Sewell, a professor of education at the University of Virginia, defended government schooling by stating each child belongs to the state. There's lots of that. I could show you a whole book full of education history and quotes like that from leading thinkers, including Woodrow freaking Wilson, that explain very clearly that government-run education in America was for the state. It was not a gimme for you. It was not to benefit your child. It wasn't even meant to be your child care or your daycare. It was meant to take your child away from you and fashion them into a perfect little lump of stuff so that the state wouldn't have a problem with your little child. And it came on the scene, coincidentally, around the time when a lot of immigrants were coming to America, most of them Catholic. They didn't like Catholics. Woodrow Wilson especially really didn't like Catholics. So then the Catholics intelligently said, we'll make our own schools. And there had to be a lawsuit out in Oregon. And it was the Little Sisters of something that sued. I can't remember the name of the case, but the Supreme Court said, no, they have a right because of the religious freedom. So every time you're tempted to just throw all religious people under the bus, remember that one of the reasons that we have parental rights at all related to education, including homeschooling, because that falls under it as well, because not everyone could afford parochial school. So the theory was, well, you can still have the right to educate your children at home for your religious purposes. Okay. So the Amish are taken care of, the Catholics are taken care of, and anybody else who feels the need to do it. And then since then, what I hear from people is, well, homeschool is where crazy Christian people go to educate their kids, which is a complete myth and not true. But I would prefer that people tip their hat and say thank you to those who said, we don't want the state teaching our kids values, and we're going to set up our own schools, and went to court and fought about it, because that is why we have what we have today. And we do not literally have people coming to the house with guns. P.S. The system in place in Germany right now is the identical one Adolf Hitler put in place in 1938. It has not changed one iota. It is compulsory. Homeschooling is illegal in Germany. Illegal for everyone. You have to be terminally ill or have some severe disability that requires you to be at home because they can't heal you at school. And that's it. And it has not changed since Hitler's time.
And you know they're going to come after homeschooling again. You know, like, we all need to be prepared for that. I'll admit, like, I used to be one of those people, absolutely, that thought that homeschooling was just for crazy religious freaks, and the children would grow up weird because they didn't have socialization. And then I looked at actually what the schools were teaching, and I was like, it's like the smartest thing that anyone can do. So we should definitely anticipate that they're going to be trying to come after homeschooling again, in the same way, frankly, that you know, I mean, I really don't want to have this conversation, but we can talk about how some people think they're going to go after Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. It's not identical, but like these issues are going to be revisited. Yeah, for sure. And it keeps coming back again and again and again. And it's when you start seeing people demonize half the country. Yeah. And, you know, look, the National School Boards Association just labeled all those people yelling in the microphone. Remember I said 2 weeks ago, oh, they're going to use this against you. They're going to take this and they're going to elevate it and make you a terrorist. And then I got the news, I got the email. I was like, oh, like I said. Well, I mean, exactly. And for people who don't know what Deb is talking about, Deb was on this channel, I think it was only like a week ago or so. And you said to people, like, when you go and you act like crazy people at the school board meeting, your name's getting put on a list. You're going to be judged for that. There's going to be retribution for that. That's why you don't go and yell like a crazy person at the school board meeting. There are better strategies to take. And people really did not want to hear that. Like there were so many angry comments. And then I clipped out that section I put up. People were so angry at being told, don't go yell like a crazy person at the school board meeting because A, the school board doesn't have the power to change what you want them to change anyway. B, it's going to have repercussions. And then lo and behold, they're now trying to label all the parents domestic terrorists that are trying to do that.
And somebody asked me, they're like, well, why don't they just tell us they don't have that power while we're standing there? I mean, maybe Justice can address that one better than I do, but the immediate thought that comes to my mind is maybe they disagree with you and they're enjoying watching you make a fool of yourself.
Yep.
Maybe they've been trained to make hay of this. I don't know. Justice,
I will answer that. No, I can answer that. They will not tell you your rights, just like the state doesn't tell, this reminds me of the Miranda case. Cops didn't have to tell you your Miranda rights until the Supreme Court said you have to. It's the same thing. When you have school committee members are also agents of the government, and you need to remember that. They take oaths, your select board and your city council takes an oath to your town. But school committee members everywhere across the country, even school boards, higher levels, they take an oath not to the state, not to a town, not to a city, but to the district, to the school itself. So it is in their best interest, and it also saves time if they do not tell you your rights up front. It is a complete disadvantage for them to tell you, oh, let's put you on a level playing field with us. Because as I've said many times about Robert's rules on my channel, if you don't know the rules, you're a victim of your own ignorance. You will be played like a card on the table. So I want people to understand this. You are literally playing poker, not knowing the rules when you're going into these meetings. They're not going to tell you that they have powers to do stuff because, quite frankly, and here's the other thing people don't understand, that while there is a lot of training for school committee members, most of them don't fully know the level of their powers. They don't know where it goes in certain directions. They don't know, where it ebbs and flows. They're guessing a little bit just as much as you do, but they have legal counsel that they can go and talk to. You don't.
Yeah.
So remember that.
And it's your tax dollars paying for it. So, it's just about, and I get so much pushback on this because most of the organizations right now that are raising money for campaigns to run people for school board. And they're all excited when they win a seat. And they're like, no, we're really making a difference because we won a seat. And I'm like, all that means is you can have enough people in that town or that district or whatever who agree with that candidate. But if you haven't taken over the whole board and they can't talk to each other privately and that person can't coalition build, and that the benefit of it is the campaign itself. So if you got money to burn and you want to get up on a soapbox and you want to run for school board and pontificate about what the schools should be doing and raise awareness using that platform, I think it's a very expensive way to do what I do and what you do, Carl, and what Justice does. I mean, I can reach actually more people than they can with their little campaign if awareness is your issue.
Yeah, and I want to, bring up this chat from Brian. Saul Alinsky style, get your opponent to overreact to make them look foolish in public.
Yes.
Listen, anyone who watches my channel knows that I'm a fan of rabble rousing. Like, I consider myself a rabble rouser at the end of the day. I'm a fan of it. I think that there is value in rabble rousing. I think there's frankly value in going in and making a fiery school board speech. But you have to understand what the goal is, and you have to understand what you're giving up when you're rabble rousing, right? So I'm not going to say that making a fiery school board speech, unless you're someone like Matt Walsh and are doing it in a school that your children will never attend, like, I'm not going to say that there's like no value in
and you're
that.
trying to raise money for yourself and get
you're trying to raise money for yourself and get on Tucker Carlson again. But it's like a pep rally. Like who compared it? Someone compared it to a pep rally, and I think this was a really apt comparison. Like the pep rally is not going to win the football game. The pep rally is going to get people excited for the football game. The pep rally might get more people to the football game. It's going to get people like feeling good about their chances of winning the football game, but it's not going to win the football game. So if your goal is to actually change things, if your goal is to actually win the football game, you need to be realistic about what's going to accomplish that. And it's not screaming like a banshee at the school board meeting.
Right. And it's not even necessarily replacing the coach. You notice that too with sports. Like, we need a new coach. Maybe you do. Maybe you have sucky players. I mean, there's so many different variables that, coaching is important, but people tend to get attached. What I've noticed is people have this hierarchy of who's going to fix it, and they go from high to low. And what's weird is they don't go all the way to the top. That's obviously too big, right? Like, I can't replace the whole state board, right? So they go to like the highest one within arm's length of them. And there's no other rhyme or reason to it. It's not logical. It's like some kind of emotional thing that like the coach has to fix and make us win the team. And of course they got all like freshmen on the team or something. I'll do my best, but whatever. Now, if you think that this all goes back to like the 1800s and then, since then we've evolved and it's changed, there's still case law. Like 2005, an appellate court judge in a case in California ruled that the state is the parent the second that kid crosses the threshold. Parens patria or whatever, the country as parent. It says the government has the authority to do anything reasonably related to its educational mission. It's not yours, not your child. Its educational mission. This is 2005. And according to Judge Stephen Reinhart, there is no, quote, there is no fundamental right of parents to be the exclusive provider of information regarding sexual matters to their children. And this does not, and that ultimately, the court wrote, parents' right to control the upbringing of the children does not extend beyond the threshold of the school door. So any rights.
So the system is working as designed.
Yes. And any rights that your state has given you, like Virginia, for example, which McAuliffe just violated. If Virginia had a right, an extra thing on top of that in their constitution or in their laws that said, well, parents got, democratically elected people that passed this thing that said we do have rights over sexual material, which apparently they did once. And McAuliffe comes in and goes, no, that doesn't count. He can't do that. So he just violated that. That's Virginia. So you have to know your own individual state. And like Justice said, if you have to understand the base premise is they started with the premise that the state owns your kids. Anything above and beyond that was won over by the individual state legislature that decided to add to that. But as a general rule, and even going up to the Supreme Court, there's precedent that they can do whatever they want. It's their educational mission, not yours. You don't own the schools. You're not taking back the schools. They were never yours to begin with. I've said this 100 times. People don't want to hear it. They're like, no, but we pay for them. Yes, we pay for the military too. Do you have an F-16 in your backyard? I mean, we pay for lots of things that we don't have any control. Did you choose to go to Afghanistan? Was that, you said, yeah, like, hey, let's go. I paid for that. No, you didn't.
No.
Did you get to say, come back from Afghanistan sooner? I paid for that. No, you didn't. Well, it's the same thing with public schools. And just because they have sweet, nice people in cute jumpers and Christmas sweaters who work there doesn't mean that it's yours.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Justice, anything to add there?
I think Deb said it all, but the one thing that I want to mention, kind of going back a little bit, is that, the campaign is really where you get the most connections. I mean, it was a happy accident when I ran for school committee. I was just like, let's just go for it. I'll throw my hat in the ring. And well, how did I end up on the channel the first time about, House Resolution 400 and 1814? Because I was running for school committee and I accidentally saw it in your locals. And me and Deb started jumping up and down, waving, fiery wands of like, hey, you pay attention to this because this is bad. And this is the other thing that people need to understand too, because I need to relook and see what's going on with those bills. But there's everything that we're talking about today, there's 10 times more going on. There's 10 times more things happening because it's too much to keep track of. All of the different cases that, different situations that Chris Rufo is paying attention to, all the stuff that Dr. B is doing, all the stuff that Deb is talking about, all the stuff that I'm talking about. People need to understand that does not even scratch the surface of the things that we're seeing on the internet or the requests that most likely there's probably like 100 emails in your inbox, Dr. B, on stuff that you can't even get to.
There's so many. I cannot even tell you guys how many emails I get every single day or DMs on Twitter. And I'm sure like you guys get some of them too, but like, there's just so much there. And even like I have alerts set up so I can see stuff that's going on at like the state and local level all around the country. It is like the fire hydrant has been opened and is just pouring out into the street every single day. It is impossible to cover everything.
Same. I mean, it's I get things. I get people begging for help. What about this? What about that? And I try as hard as I can to help everybody and cover everything. But sometimes I just end up writing back and saying, "Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad. It's just bad." I mean, like, yeah, I can't give you hope about your school or your system. And you know, as I said, there's not much you can do. K through 5 is a loss. It's a complete loss because of the hypersexualization, the gender theory, and the SEL, all of which are connected. By the way, all of these are connected. They're all connected. They're all in service to successor idea. What we now call successor ideology or collectivism or whatever you want to. Critical theory. It is that is what it is.
Yeah. And so let's get into this, because I think, critical race theory is obviously the big hot button topic that has gotten a lot of national exposure over the past several months. But there is also all these other nefarious ideologies. And I think Deb made a really good point that I just want to make sure to emphasize. Like, these are all coming from the same place. They're all different legs off of the same, dozen-legged monster that is the public school system. So, like, what I've always thought is, like, as soon as critical race theory got too dicey, they were going to change the name to something else. Well, it's not even that they're just changing the name; it's that they're introducing new ways of teaching the same fundamental concepts. So we have things like equity, social justice, anti-racism, culturally responsive learning, socio-emotional learning. These, like, for the purpose of, like, everyday people, consider them all to be part of the same system. Like, they are not separate from one another. But I want to talk specifically about socio-emotional learning, because this stuff is terrifying. So who wants to give a good overview of what is SEO?
I think Deb knows more. Throw it her way.
Deb, take it away.
All right. So originally, and whether you agree with it, I happen to sort of disagree with it anyway, because I think parents should be parents and schools should be school. But the original idea was that the way we interact with each other, the way we think about ourselves and so forth is central to how we learn. And that for children to learn successfully in a school environment, they have to have a handle on things like emotional regulation, interpersonal communication, and intrapersonal communication. Intra meaning, like, with myself. How do I explain what's going on in the world to myself? All right. And for a while, the programs from a company called Castle, and I don't know if Panorama Ed was in existence, but Castle was like the big company. They had things that would give, lessons for teachers, trainings for teachers primarily. They would teach them how to engage with students and how to give them little tools to sort of calm themselves down and, solve disputes with each other. But, and here's where my personal opinion comes in. Like, it sounds good, and especially because it didn't have any critical theory or collectivism attached to it. It was just about a little bit of psychology in the classroom. If it's going to the school counselor, then it's good. I think it was like, if the school counselor is one learning this and taking the trainings and learning about children and how to help them navigate these waters, especially when they're coming from homes there might be trauma, I think could be good for school counselors to know that. Okay. If you start deputizing every teacher to basically be a psychologist when they're not a trained clinician, I think there's potential for corruption and weirdness there. I don't think that's a good idea.
Like, and can I just emphasize this point? Yeah. Like, I have a literal PhD in psychology, but I am not a clinician. It is unethical for me to treat people in a clinical setting. And yet we have elementary school teachers with no training in psychology at all performing these exact roles.
Well, and that was when it was good. Like, that's when it was like a healthy little, like, count to 10 and do these things. And, okay, so like whatever it used to be, where still the individual was first, and individual, like, autonomy and those kinds of ideas and the Western values were still the bedrock of what was going on. And about, I think, 2017 or so, it changed. And suddenly we needed social emotional learning to facilitate, guess what? What's the word? What's the E word? Equity. Right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. So now what we need to do is we need to get inside the heads of the children, because the reason we don't have equity and the reason we have these disparities is that these little tiny children are racist. And what we need to do is we need to therapy the racism out of them. Okay. But what we have to first do is identify where it lives and gradually, deconstruct it and so forth. But we're going to start really young. They'd like to go down to 3. They
The
like to go to 3.
Arizona Department of Education teaches
Yeah.
that children are racist starting at 3 years old.
Right. And so they
Yeah.
would like to go to those great, but actually there's a company now that is pushing a program. I think Sloan Rackmuth is researching it. And that preschool program says that children as young as 6 months are racist.
Oh, for
and
Christ's sake.
Ibram X. Kendi says so too. And that's based on a study. It wasn't really a study. It was babies, how long their eyes took to focus on their caregivers. And they only used white babies.
What?
That's the other thing, is they only used white babies. And they had the white babies and the white caregivers, and their eyes gradually, would focus very fast, right? Then they would have a black caregiver come in, and it would take like a fraction of a second longer for their eyes to focus. They're racist. Okay, it's not the study, the people performed the study who said that. It was people using this study to further their agenda. Of course, it wasn't even a controlled study. So let's, it's sort of like the implicit bias study, same concept. So Ibram X. Kendi writes a book, Antiracist Baby, or whatever. So SEL Now is about doing things that claim to be helping the children, with themselves and regulating emotions and get along with each other. But when you look at what they're doing, it is about rooting out any individualism, rooting out any sense of personal autonomy and personal responsibility, and making sure that this child from a very young age sees him or herself as their bundle of identities, as assigned by the helpful teachers and leaders in the little classes and all that, and so that they progress through school in their appropriate role, so that they can make sure not to get in the way of other people, because of course the number one goal of school now is equity, that we all arrive at the same place at the same time. But we have to drum out all that competitiveness and individuality, all those negative things that come from that icky Western Enlightenment, values. No, we don't want that anymore, because equity. So imagine what happens to a little bitty child who comes in like all joyful or even just calm, but like, I'm good. Everything's fine, And they're like, well, honey, you're privileged and you're white and you're cis and you're this and you're that and you're other, and you're like, what are your pronouns? And maybe you're not really a girl and maybe you're not really a boy. And we need to, there's a gender wall, and find yourself in the gender wall, and all these kinds of things. And that emotional regulation becomes about somebody approaches you and insults you, and maybe they are, they're of a different race and you're white, and now they teach you how to take it, because you have to decenter yourself. So you're calming down. It's not what they say doesn't matter because you're special and important and, worthwhile. It's, well, maybe you really shouldn't be upset because privilege. Maybe you need to count to 10 and think about your privilege. So it's going to become a completely different set of messages where all of your focus is external. You don't have individual autonomy. You defer to the group. Your identity is wrapped up in the group. You're a tiny little social justice warrior.
So it strikes me, and both of you tell me if I'm wrong about this. It strikes me that teaching children to repress their individual identities from the time they are 3 or 4 years old might have some unintended consequences.
You think?
Later in life.
Oh, by the way, I see someone saying this is not happening in my district in New Jersey. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Oh, New Jersey mandates the gender stuff. Gender theory is mandated in New Jersey schools.
So is equity. So is diversity, equity, inclusion. Mm-hmm. So is all that stuff. Yeah, if you don't think it's happening in your district, it's because they're hiding it from you.
Yeah. It's happening.
So they're
everywhere.
just hiding it from you. They've just covered it up, changed the name of it, called it something else. It's happening. And if it's not happening in the classroom, it's happening to the teachers. The teachers are going to, those in-service trainings where like your kid has to stay home and they say they're doing like, it's an in-service day or it's a teacher work
TD
day.
days, yeah.
TD days. Those teachers now, almost all, if not all of the trainings they are going through are non-academic anymore. They do not go to trainings on how to teach math better. They don't go to trainings on how to teach reading better. They go to trainings in diversity, equity, inclusion. And there is an example. I wonder if I could show it to you. It's somebody, I think Sloan sent it to me. And it is, if I send you something, can you pull it up?
You can share this on the screen. I think. Do you have the ability to do that?
I'd have to go open Twitter. So
you can send it to me too. I'm happy.
I'm gonna send it to you. I'm gonna sort of send it to you because I think it's gonna be easier.
That's fine.
In the end to do. Okay, share photo, and I'm gonna send it to to you. But anyway, the point is that they are trying to train the teachers and saying, this is how you must think and this is what you must do. And of course, any teacher that has an issue with it is going to very quickly end up, on the outs and possibly super duper uncomfortable and not wanting to do this stuff. So okay,
well, I just want to make the point while you're sending the photo. So you said like it is absolutely happening in your schools. When I was fighting for HB 544, we would hear from schools all the time. There was one specific school in New Hampshire, in Bedford, that made this big to-do. We called them out, like they were called, the sponsor of the bill called them out in a local publication, said this is happening in Bedford schools. Bedford came and said, no, we're not doing it. You're dirty liars. Guess what? Within 1 week, there was a whistleblower from the Bedford schools that gave us everything we needed. And I knew it was happening anyway because I had heard about it from the parents, but there was a whistleblower that came out and said, yep, this stuff is happening. Like every single school that we have actively looked for this stuff in, I promise you it's happening.
Yeah. So I just sent it in your Twitter DMs.
Okay. I got it. Hang on.
Okay. And I think it's about becoming an anti-racist organization. Yeah. And what you need to understand is that SEL is sometimes being presented as SEL, and sometimes it's being presented as making yourself into an anti-racist multicultural organization. Sometimes it's culturally responsive learning or teaching. But check this out. These are their therapeutic goals. Okay? So they've got symbolic change, a compliance organization. All right. Can you see?
Official policy pronouncements regarding diversity, make intentional effort at inclusiveness, still unaware of pattern of privilege and control. And then they go to identity change, an affirming organization, develops an analysis of systemic racism, increased commitment to dismantle racism and eliminate white advantage. Oh, isn't that an interesting term? White advantage. Exactly. Institutional structures are like the mission of, hang on, I can't read that. Hang on, let me look at my other screen. Institutional structures, culture, maintain white power and privilege. And then we go to a transforming organization. And then I think we see
commit to struggle. Commit to struggle. Oh. Anytime you see struggle, that's Marxism.
Struggle section.
Yeah. Redefines and rebuilds all relationships and activities based on anti-racist commitments.
Holy shit. What is this from?
This is from it's a plan on changing and becoming equitable schools, whatever. But our North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is rolling this out, and our Department of Public Instruction is run by a Republican.
This is important because I've been getting a lot of emails from people saying, Carlin, North Carolina banned this crap in their school.
No,
this is in North Carolina.
No.
Wow.
No. Anytime you hear like they banned this or they banned that or they made a commitment to this,
they
made a commitment to that.
They're just going to change the name of it. They're just going to change the name.
And the other thing that's SEL does, so this is just how they're working with like teachers and administrators, and there's like, this is what they have to commit to. Now, do you think you're going to long keep your job if you come up against any of these phases and you say, hell no, and we're not doing this?
Yeah.
How long do you think you're going to keep your job?
No. You're not, because here's the other part of this conversation is that it's a psychological thing, but they're presenting it as curriculum. People need to understand that this is being presented as curriculum. It's not being presented as, oh, this is just a thing that the guidance counselors do. It's just this thing that the school psychologist does. No, we need to go into your classroom and we need to have a whole lesson plan on this. Like that is what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. If there is a curriculum section to your school board meetings, not gonna specify any in particular, but if there is, and you start hearing about SEL and social emotional learning, or if they try and change the name, they're coming up with different ways to do that, and they're involving the guidance office in it with the school psychologist. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? This is what you're looking at. And it's just, and my way of looking at it is that it is just in practical terms so that people can understand. One of the things that people have noticed is that and schools have aptly noticed this, is that a lot of children are coming out of public school with a lot of emotional issues. This is the reason why, because this is the tool that they're using to manifest the problem that they are creating. Oh, there's all this racism going on. Well, they're teaching the kids how to be racist this way. Their dream or their fear or their irrational, hyperbolic, oh my God, this is happening everywhere. It's becoming our reality because they have tactics to make it so. they're making their hypochondria. You know, I have an example of this that I'm going to put on my channel later, but I say, oh, my foot's broken. And you're like, oh, my foot's not broken. And then I'm like, oh no, but my foot is broken. And then I run it over with a truck. Well, guess what? That's exactly what this is for these teachers. They're saying the system's broken, fix it with this tool. Well, no, the system's not broken. You don't need to do that. Then they take a sledgehammer, break the system, and say, well, we need to fix it now. And what I just did was totally acceptable. And they gaslight you.
Right.
It's exactly what's going on.
And this is, you know, they say things that sound so pleasant. Like, I'm going to send you another one, Carlin, that is from Castle, that what they're doing right now. But they make it sound like, oh, this is so fine. Like, what is the problem? Why are you, you know, but the issue is that it is not at all fine. And hang on one second. Let me get this to you.
Okay.
So social emotional learning is the name. That's what SEL stands for. This is the plan components. This is Castle. This is a company.
Got it.
That we're going to be using in North Carolina. This is a company they use all over the country if they're not using other. Okay. So this is okay. Castle Guide to School-Wide SEL, a supportive classroom environment. A supportive and equitable environment in all classrooms serves as a platform for all academic, social, and emotional learning. This is going to be in all classrooms. At the core of supportive classroom is a caring, engaging teacher who establishes authentic, trusting relationships with each student. They're not your therapist. They're your teacher. They're your teacher. We place way too much emphasis on this caring, loving, living. No, it's not your parent. Okay. Integration of SEL and academic instruction is going to find its way into your art projects and your literature selections and your history. Okay. Foster the integration of SEL and academics involves three interdependent components: fostering academic mindsets, our beliefs or ways of perceiving oneself in relation to learning, and they lay the groundwork for deep academic, social, and emotional learning.
Oh my God.
Aligning it to academic objectives. Each academic discipline has its own questions, processes, and proficiencies. Teachers consider what students should know and be able to do in planning their lessons. Using interactive pedagogy. When instructional practice is active, involves students in making meaning of content. This is code, families. When they say the student's going to make meaning of the content, they mean the student's going to teach it to the damn self. This is a way they cover up the fact that they're not instructing. That's why they don't call them instructors. That's why they barely call them teachers. They call them educators, okay? Because they no longer are the sage on a stage. They're barely a guide on the side. They want inquiry-based learning and interactive learning, and the students should make meaning. They're like handing kids worksheets and passages and go, figure it out. Literally. They're not even teaching. And then they're saying this is about their social and emotional and self-aware. They put all these fancy words and they make you think this is a good thing, making meaning of content. They're more deeply engaged in their learning and have meaningful opportunities to practice SEL skills. What are SEL skills? Oh, I don't know. Maybe you know, and I don't know. And I'm just white, so I'll shut up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It could be a whole lot of nothing, but the bottom line is this is psychological practice, not academic practice. These are not licensed clinicians. They are turning your academic classroom into a little group therapy session about who do you think you are? And let's make meaning of the world and your learning, when the student is there to learn. The student's not there to like whatever this is. Okay. Also, Panorama Ed is the other brand other than Castle. They're Mark Zuckerberg's investment project. And what they do is lots and lots of digitized surveys, where they call them climate surveys, to see how the climate of the school is and how everybody's mood is every flipping whatever month, day, whatever it is. And they're asking questions that technically they're not supposed to ask, like about whether the kid's using drugs or thinking of harming themselves, and things a psychologist would ask in a psychiatric office or a medical practice, not a digitized thing where it's going out into who knows where. The data is then owned by who knows whom, bought and sold by who knows whom. And your child has a student number that goes at the top. So it's not anonymous. And you're supposed to be able to opt out, but you don't even know what's happening half the time. They are collecting data so that they can then find out who's at risk. At risk is code for who do we need to drag in a room with the counselor and get rid of the last vestiges of individuality.
So it strikes me. Oh, go ahead, Justice. Go ahead.
One of the things that I want to tell people is that, and people probably didn't realize this year, But one of the requirements, I believe it was either for the CARES 1 or CARES 2 Act funding, was for school districts across the country to send out an equity survey. That was part of the coronavirus aid packages. So if your town or city accepted those funds, not at the town level, but at the school level and the school district level, well, what do you think happened? They sent out a survey that you didn't know about. And here's the thing. I understand what Deb is talking about when she talks about like, oh, if it was happening just through the guidance office, maybe that would be okay. I'm going to be dead set against that. People who are trained psychologists should be, I know that what we're getting at, but trained, only the school psychologist can administer and do this kind of work. Maybe unethical, but they're the only ones able to do it. Anybody else who does it, I'm sorry, and guidance counselors are not licensed for this. It is illegal. They are practicing. It is the equivalent of practicing medicine without a license. They are practicing psychology on a student, on a minor, without a license. It is illegal. And if you
but they've since,
and I get it.
They've so disguised it though. That's the problem, Justice. They've disguised it so well that we would have a really hard time claiming they're doing clinical work. I mean, you know it.
Yeah,
I know
because they've disguised it as a curriculum.
Correct.
Because it's a curriculum to them.
But
that read like a curriculum. That doesn't
have
read
you
like
ever
a
been
psychological
to an art
exam.
therapy session? Have you ever been to an art therapy session? They do
No,
art therapy and music therapy. But such a thing exists, right? These things exist. So all they're doing is they're baking it into the curriculum. And it also has a nifty little side effect, which is it further covers the fact that they're not teaching material.
Right.
And they are able to choose books that are about feelings and these kinds of struggle literature and all that kind of stuff because it furthers the SEL goals, which really, if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, is to decenter your whiteness as they perceive it. This is a way of achieving equity by basically knocking all the kids down a peg so that everybody comes out equal and nobody has an advantage over another. They're mowing the grass. They're not fertilizing the lawn.
So I want to make an analogy, and I want you guys to let me know if this analogy is correct, because we all know about Gabrielle Clark's lawsuit. It's something I covered many times on this channel. We all know her. Gabrielle Clark, for anyone who is not familiar, is a mom out in Nevada who sued her son's high school and actually has an extremely strong case against this school, one of the strongest cases against CRT being taught in schools in the country right now. So please go support Gabrielle Clark's lawsuit if you can. But she sued the high school because her son, who was a senior in high school, so 17 years old, the high school tried to force him to say he was an oppressor in the classroom in a required class in order to graduate. Now, her son, being that he was 17 and also biracial, by the way, so he's not white, but he has very light skin. So he apparently looked close enough. Being that he was 17, he said, no, I'm not saying I'm an oppressor. The school suspended him for that and then tried to prevent him from graduating. Luckily, they got an injunction. He ended up graduating. All was fine. It strikes me, though, that social emotional learning is very literally taking what happened to Gabrielle Clark's 17-year-old son and doing it to children when they are 5, 6, 7 years old, repeatedly, all the time, every single day, at a time when they are literally not able to comprehend what's happening and are certainly not able to defend themselves from what's happening. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Good.
It's 100% correct. And, this is why we have kids who are so emotionally fragile. This is why we have kids who believe the things they say, even though they're saying something that is demonstrably untrue. I don't know if you guys saw it was making the rounds today on social media about a girl who hit a guy from behind. And I think he was driving like a Ferrari or something, really nice white car. And she hit him from behind and then got out of her car. She looked to be about maybe 18, 19 years old and ran up to him and tapped on the window and accused him of hitting the front of her car with the back of his car and screaming at him and making this whole scene. And then she went all, nuclear of you white people and all this other junk. And she was reacting the way a toddler might react, because toddlers have a very twisted sense of cause, effect, and morality. And so if a bad thing happens and they're to them, kind of, they look around for who's nearby. And if that person's even like remotely nearby, it's like, why did you do that? Like they don't connect their own behavior to actions as quickly. This girl, you could see it in her face. She wasn't lying like the way you would think. She genuinely believed that he was the cause of the damage to her car, when the video clearly showed, a woman had a video that she slammed right into him.
Yep.
Caught on video. But you could see in her face and her eyes and her facial expressions, she believed it. So what they're doing is they are taking these young children and completely warping their sense of self in relation to the environment. It is natural human behavior. We learn to adapt to our environment for survival. We have to. Okay. So if you take a 6-year-old, or God forbid, a 3-year-old, and you stick them in an environment where the stressors are completely different from home, I mean, like night and day different. And the only way they're going to be remotely comfortable, because they create such intense discomfort, they say things and do things that are like the opposite of what mom and dad do, is to adapt their reality and their belief system and their worldview to that environment where they spend 8 hours a day, because otherwise they will quite literally go insane. So in order to have any equilibrium at all, that's what you do. This is normal. And they know that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't think they don't. No, when I say they, I'm talking about people up here, pedagogy designers and researchers and stuff like that. In fact, some of the ones who know it are screaming, don't do this. But they're drowned out because it serves a purpose. These people genuinely believe they're changing humanity for the better, to make us little groupthink groupies. And they create, what Greg Lukianoff says is, they create cognitive distortion. They teach the sort of belief systems of depressed people, black and white thinking, catastrophizing. They personalize every bad thing that happens to them. Like the girl with the car. She hit him. No, you hit me. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. But she believed it. And she's she's older. Maybe she's 20. I don't know. But now imagine how your little kid is going to be. So best case scenario, your teenager hates your guts, like thinks you should be thrown in prison for your values and your beliefs. Okay, that's your best case scenario. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be funny. They want that. They're trying to destroy the family. In fact, there is material out there, and part of it is Black Lives Matter curriculum, that explicitly states that the family is a problem.
Yeah, they're talking. It's been all over social media in the last couple of days. I think it was like Wesley Yang, I think, was talking about this, is like the dismantling of the family. Correct. Is actually something they're working on now.
So you have to break apart the bonds. And how do you do that?
Yeah. Justice, anything to add there?
This is just my thoughts. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't understand how any parent, and I'm speaking directly into the audience right now, how any single parent watching this right now and understanding that we don't even know every instance of what's going on in these school systems thinks that sending their kids not just to public school but to private school is at all even a good. And this is the thing, these ideas, this critical pedagogy that we're talking about, it came out of public school and private schools. It came out of those, an amalgamation of both. I'm sorry, but if you are a parent thinking that this is salvageable, it's not, because it's working exactly as intended. And I'm struggling to understand. I kind of get it, because people are being cognitively dissident. They're trying not to think about, because it's overwhelming to the senses. But I don't. I'm feeling it like Deb is. I'm getting really frustrated by people right now. I'm getting frustrated by that.
I'm going to be honest, though. Like, I understand why people think what they do, because they have been given bad information by people that they trust. And again, I'm not a person who would say there's no value in going to the school board. I think there is, but I also think that people are not understanding what that value is and how to use it appropriately. And I want to bring up this super chat from Turd Ferguson. I appreciate the super chat. He says, appreciate the clear-eyed analysis and explanations. The one pushback I'd offer for taking over a school board is that it serves as an official platform to rally and educate parents on what their rights really are, like this stream.
But it doesn't. You don't get to talk about whatever you
doesn't.
want. It's not a platform. It's not a YouTube channel. You have district business to do, and they serve in staggered terms. Taking over a school board would take you years, and good luck. It's really hard. And even if you manage to pull it off, you have district business to do, and you could get elevated. It goes up to the board, the state board, and they can discipline you if you do not do the district's business. Right? Am I getting that right?
No, you're completely correct. The state board, if they think that there's too much going on, Boston Public Schools, I can't remember what happened in the last Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. No, I know the Boston Public Schools are not good, but I'm talking about at the board level. 2 of their board members in Boston Public Schools resigned, and I don't remember what the motion was. But Bessie, my Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, has stepped in to do certain things with them. They've already immediately intervened because Boston, of course, as education is, it's too big to fail. So they have to make sure it succeeds. Where was I going with that? What I was going to go with that is that, that school, this is the thing, and people need to understand it. If you look at my channel is a great example of it. My channel hasn't grown in the past 4 months because what videos am I allowed to make that don't violate sunshine laws? I can't talk about critical race theory. I can't talk about, how the money's flowing. I couldn't do that up until like 2 weeks ago when I resigned, and then I took on, a new job because of that. It's just, took on a new job after that, not because of that. But it's just, people need to understand that when you're on a school committee, it is about the issues presented in front of you, and they can't educate you on what your rights are. Even if you're a newbie like I was, people don't look at it fondly when you take time away from the meeting to talk about what is the actual state statute. They don't like it, and it's not really looked on favorably if you try and help people navigate public comment session. It's not, and you can see this even in Loudoun County. You can understand that it's not, they don't look at it fondly to help them. It's difficult because just because you're on a YouTube live stream every week on your school committee or every couple of weeks on your school committee, you can't just say whatever you want. It has to be relevant to the topics of the meeting or relevant to the business of the district. And I'm sorry, but the most views that my school committee meetings got are like in the 50 to 100 view range. The masking ones got almost like over 700 and 600 views, but that's because it was something everybody wanted to look at. Most of the time, people aren't watching that. It's just, it blows my mind that people think that that's going to work. The only way people are going to learn how the system works, and I've talked about it in a chat with both of you, and this is why I started my locals community, is in that community, and it's really new. There's like nothing on it yet because I have to work with it. I'm going to start talking about how the government works and how these systems work and how it is from the outside perspective, because ladies and gentlemen, there is a reason that most of the people pushing this stuff are literature teachers and history teachers, because they know the rules and they know they can get away with everything that they're doing. It's not a mystery that it's not the science teachers, although they're starting to come up into the works too. It's your history teachers and your ELA teachers because they know how to read and write, the way that the state wants them to. Barely, but the way that the state wants them to, and they know, hey, the board doesn't have that kind of power over me. It's the superintendent. I'm pals with the superintendent. So what do I care?
There's another reason though, Justice, and it's a more academic reason, and that is that when you read books in ELA class, okay, and you do the most reading in school in ELA, and secondarily to that, social studies. But you remember we used to read literature? And remember we read literature from the canon, you would read about all different kinds of people and different kinds of situations. And you would have to think critically, because in order to understand the story and discuss the story, you'd all read the same book. You would have to sort of put yourself in their shoes, and you would have to think about yourself and have a little internal dialogue and all that kind of stuff to actually understand the book. Well, if they replace those kinds of books that inspire critical thinking and diversity of thought in the discussion with books where it's crystal clear what the approved opinion is, like stamped from the beginning, okay, or some other struggle literature, and it's very obvious like that. If they do that, then it's a hop, skip, and a jump. Or as we saw at the conference I went to, the private school kids they were specialized high school kids from like Brooklyn Tech or something. They put up their assignment for Great Gatsby. They were trying to find the overt and covert racism in the Great Gatsby. So their assignment, they had the little triangle with the overt racism and describe all the incidences of racism in the Great Gatsby. They're not getting anything out of that novel, but that was done in English class. So the English teacher and the history teacher can adulterate what they're doing, and you're never going to freaking know about it because we're reading the Great Gatsby. Oh, that's a classic, wonderful book. That's fantastic. Yeah, but did you know they're looking for the racism in the Great Gatsby? So that's what they do. And the thing that really shocked me and made me sad at this conference that I attended was that there were a lot of private school parents there. And a lot of people in the audience might be thinking, well, private school, the parents pay such high tuition. We're talking $50,000, $60,000 a year for high school. Surely they have more say in the curriculum. They have less. They have even less because the school can go, get out. There's the door. They can kick you out. Your student can't stand up in class and say, I decide no. I decide I'm not going to find racism in the Great Gatsby. They'll be like, all right, you're expelled. So, and you lose your money and you don't get a refund. But the contract they have to sign, their enrollment contract, one of the parents read it to us, and it was like a long laundry list of all the freedom of speech rights that the student and the parents give up, including in private social media and private emails and private listservs and private groups, anything attached to their name. If they criticize the school, complain about the school, or in any way make the teachers or the admins uncomfortable, their student can be kicked out. So I blurt out in front of everybody, who would sign that? Right? Typical Deb. And there are all these people in the room. They're like, we would. And I'm sitting there like, why? Like, why would you do that? And I have an enrollment contract here. I won't name the school, but this is a different one with different policy. This is the gender and inclusion statement. The purpose of this statement is to provide information and guidelines to ensure protection, respectful treatment, blah, blah, blah. The school will accept the gender identity of each student asserts. There is no medical or mental health diagnosis or treatment threshold that students must meet in order to have their gender identity recognized and respected. The assertion may be evidenced by an expressed desire to be consistently recognized by their gender identity. Students ready to socially transition may initiate the process to change their name, pronoun, attire, and access to preferred activities and facilities. Each person has a unique process for transitioning to the school, yada, yada, yada. The school will work with the parents and guardians of a student whenever possible and appropriate, but we understand and agree the parent parent approval will not be a prerequisite for respecting a student's gender identity. They're paying $51,000 a year to go there. And the school is saying, we're not asking you. We're not informing you. We're going to recognize the kid, whatever the kid tells us. Mm-hmm. And they pay for this. So if you were thinking that this is only in the government schools, it is not. And as I said, it's there. You get to forfeit your tuition, forfeit your acceptance. Now, I personally wouldn't just go there. I just wouldn't have anything to do with these schools. That's me. But if you think that they have some other, that like they have control because it's private, no, they don't. They really, really don't. And what shocked me too is how I think more than the public school parents, that's my personal opinion, there is this belief, maybe it has something to do with money, I don't know, that if we just put enough money in the right group or with the right people, they'll fix it for us. They'll fix it. Right? Public interest group, parent organizing group, people who write erudite books about this subject and give good talks, you're going to fix it, right? You're going to go and fix our free speech in our schools, right? In our private schools, you're going to take care of this, right? And then when they have to find out that, no, we can't do that. We can educate you about what you should be thinking about this, how you should think about your child. But when it comes right down to it, you guys have to, as Carlin said, you have to step back. This is an exercise that I do whenever I get really overwhelmed. I step back and think about, what do I know to be true? What do I know? What do I know for fact and know to be true? Because there's so much cognitive dissonance and it hurts. It hurts badly. You planned your whole life around, I'm going to put my kid in these schools and I'm going to go on about my business and I have my career. I'm going to live my life here. We bought in this zip code. So when somebody comes like me or Justice or Carlin comes and says, sorry, it's actually really dangerous for your child, you're like, no, 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 no. You don't want to believe it. So I recognize that and I respect that. So what you do is you step back and say, all right, I don't know any of this, of whether it's true or not. What do I know? I know that I had children for these reasons. I know that I love my children. I know that I want what's best for my children. I'm giving you all the benefit of the doubt. I want what's best for them, and I want them to own their education and own their life. Those are my core values of why I became, and I want them to have good values that came from me and my family and our life. Okay, that's why I had kids. That's what I know to be true. Now, how do I feel about that? Because once you know what you know, then you can know how to feel about it. Okay, well, I feel pretty strongly about that. Yep, let me get back in touch with that. Yep, I'm pretty in touch with, I feel really strongly about what I wanted to be as a parent and what I wanted to achieve for my child as a parent. That is your foundation of strength to do the hard thing, to do the next step. But you do have to first do that, because if you just try to plow ahead with like a peer pressure and all these things and money in my job, it ground yourself first and draw strength from what you know and what you feel from what you know. And then go forward from there. And it will, I hope, be easier for you to do what is necessary, because these poor parents, and my heart goes out to them and their kids. I didn't hear them talking a lot about their kids. It was like, fix it. Somebody fix it. And I'm like, children, babies, children. Hello, can we talk about the children? So you got to step back and do that first.
But that's what I said at the beginning of this, is that you can't, these people have to realize that Superman isn't coming to save them. You know, it's like what we talked about at our dinner. Superman isn't, and it's not about being your own Superman. You have to be your own person. You got to be your own Deb. You got to be your own Justice. You got to be your own, you got to be your own person. And you have to recognize what your values are. If your values are that you want your kids indoctrinated in a government education, well, then you're doing exactly the right thing by sending them to public school. But if that's not your values, then you have to think about it, and you have to make choices. You can't dance around this. You can't wait, because we can talk about this all day, but like, I can only give information. Deb can only give information. Carlin can only give information. I can't walk in and save you. Nobody can. The only controllable element in this situation is what the parent does. You can't control your teachers. You can't control your school district. You can't control what your city or your town is going to do. And you sure as heck cannot control what the state and the federal government are going to do. You are the only agent in this situation that can change. You're the only agent of change in this situation. You have to recognize your value, your power in that. Use it, take your kids out of that situation. And another thing too, when you let your kids go into these situations, public school, I was in public school for, my entire, elementary and secondary education experience. It's a battlefield now. People talk about, how, the disciplinary situations are awful. And there was a recent homeschooling parent that shared something on Facebook that I saw, was that the difference between homeschooling and public schooling, that's not the only difference, but it's a good difference, is one of the differences in who disciplines your kids. Do you trust yourself to discipline your kids, or do you trust the other person that you don't know? And I think that's a point that people need to get across.
And also, guys, private schools do get government funding. Like, a lot of people think they don't, but they do. And I just want to read you some salaries from some of the New York headmasters of some of the biggest schools. How's about $1,041,864 for the headmaster salary? That would be 2020 of one of the schools.
No shit.
There are one.
That was 2020.
Yeah, there are 1, 2, 3. It was higher.
Oh,
that
no.
one was actually higher in 2018. It was 2 million. But anyway, so it obviously went down due to budget cuts, I'm sure. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 schools above 900,000, and most of those are in over $1 million salaries. Okay,
God.
these are the biggest day school. These are day schools in New York.
What in the
And
world?
Wow.
go back to 2010, and they were making $480,000, $500,000. Still a lot of money, but it's New York City, right?
Yeah.
Why 100% increase in 10 years?
Has anyone had 100% increase in their salary in the last 10 years besides the headmaster at Dalton?
I mean, I'm just saying. And so you know me, guys. If those who do know me, I'm very pro parent. I give parents a lot more benefit of the doubt than most people, I think, who, you hear a lot and, where were the parents, right? But when I see stuff like this and I see people voluntarily going, here, this 50,000, here's this. So we can maybe attribute some of this to flight away from, other schools. We can maybe attribute some of this to market demand because of, the public schools are getting really, really, really bad and they're ending testing for the fancy high schools that are public, and who knows. So some of this is market demand. But at the end of the day, people are making the decision to do this as opposed to maybe homeschool. Now, I don't know, but if I had $1 million, if I had $57,000 to spend on one child going to school, I could do a lot of great homeschooling with them. Like, I could hire a private tutor to come in and do all the classes and my own home, and maybe bring 5 of their closest friends along with them. So this is remarkable to me that people are doing this, knowing that they're going, and we're going to transition your child, and we're not going to tell you, and oh, by the way, you have to sign away your free speech rights to come here.
I just keep coming back to the fact that I don't understand why more parents aren't more focused on how to fix this effing problem. Like, and again, like, I'm a person that I think that going to the school board meeting, and it has a certain value. I'm not going to disagree with that. But the problem is that when you are focusing all of your attention on the flipping school board, that means you are inherently taking your attention away from every other way in which you could be solving this problem that will be more effective. Okay. Right. So I want to get a couple of super chats in. Alexandra Martin, thank you for being a member of the channel for 7 months. I'm sorry I can't bring your chat up on the screen, but StreamYard hasn't integrated this feature yet. She says, thank you, Deb, Carlin, and Justice, for this convo. I'll be having my local anti-CRT group watch this together as CRT is in our schools. This will be super helpful. What a neat perk. Yeah, the neat perk is like YouTube now allows people who've been channel members for a certain amount of time to do comments like once a month, which I think is pretty cool too. But no, I think doing what Alexandra is saying and getting together with some other parents to watch this conversation and listen to Deb and Justice's good advice, I think that is 1,000 times more productive than going and yelling at the school board. It just is. So let's start by doing the thing that's the most productive. And then if we still have time to go and yell at the school board, go do your thing, man. Like, I'm not gonna tell you no, but do the important. It's like you have to eat your vegetables before you have dessert. If all you're eating is dessert every single day, that's not going to work out well for you. So you got to eat your vegetables first, go and do the work and do the important things. Then if you have extra time, you can go have fun. You can go out and play. Turd Ferguson, thank you again for the super chat. If SEL/CRT is therapeutic or psychological in nature, are the materials, training, curriculum, participation subject to FERPA requests, etc.? Requests for informed consent, professional, medical, psychological standards. Let's talk about this.
First, because they've been so clever with their word usage and how they're doing it and all these kinds of things, it is there's loopholes. There are little loopholes they can get away with not calling it therapeutic and not calling it, psychological. Now, the surveys I talked about, where the student is sitting there and filling out a little my pronouns or this or that, or here's my mom makes this much money and my dad and they're divorced, and okay, that violates PPRA, and they are supposed to notify you in advance that they're doing these surveys. And what I recommend to parents to do is don't wait for notification, because they go, oh, but we did, and it was in an email that you maybe lost or didn't find, or we sent it home in a backpack. Okay, don't wait. First day of school or before school, if you're sending your kids to school, you write, you make sure you put it in writing, and you'd make a physical copy and get a copy back that they signed, like have them photocopy and hand it to you, that you say, my child is not to participate in any surveys, digital, written, or otherwise. No surveys of the school, period. With not even with my permission. There's no surveys. They're not necessary to their learning, by the way. They have nothing to do with their academic learning. So you have that right. I'm opting out. I'm opting my child out of every single survey. The only surveys you can ever not opt your child out of wouldn't be performed necessarily by your child alone. And there are things like the kid is being, evaluated for special needs, and like you're probably either going to be involved or something to do with, things to do with their reading, whatever. That's something totally different. You can opt out of those. But a test with like, come on, little child, answer these questions and give us these answers. By the way, a privilege walk falls into that category. You can tell your child right now, do not ever participate in a privilege walk. Do not participate in it's a gender wall activities. Don't participate in any activity where your child is sorting him or herself, labeling him or herself, identifying him or herself on a matrix, intersectionality, privilege, or otherwise. Simply teach your child. And yes, even if your child is young, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't answer questions about anything to do that isn't like math or reading or something like that. I don't answer these survey questions. And you write it and you give it to school and get a copy back. No surveys.
Justice.
The reason, and I like that Deb's bringing this up, because it brings us right back to the PPRA. And one of the reasons why that the guidance that we're giving is that if you have a child between kindergarten and 5th grade, why you need to take them out of the school district and not put them in period, because those kids cannot aggressively say, mommy and daddy said no, I don't want to do it. They don't understand it. They don't. They simply have no grasp of the situation. Well, mommy and daddy send me to school and I'm supposed to trust this person. And they tell me to trust this person, but only in this one specific instance. But I don't really know when that instance is. Well, this woman's telling me that it's not, so I'm going to go with it. And I think it's okay, because if I don't think it's okay, I'm going to get freaked out and I'm going to have a panic attack in the classroom, or whatever spins up the child or whatever concerns the child. And while that may, in certain children's minds, maybe it starts them down the path of maybe I shouldn't trust these people, it can push them in the other direction too, which is what it's intended to do, and say, well, mommy and daddy are the only ones telling me no on this. Why are they the only ones?
Correct. So
why won't mommy and daddy let me be like the other kids?
They've got you over a barrel because they know that kids are so sensitive to any kind of peer pressure or group pressure. I mean, they've done experiments on this. We saw it at the conference. There was a little video that Fire made where they showed an experiment that was done, I think, on college kids, where they had one person who was the real subject of the experiment and like 6 or 7 who were plants. And they had the person in the front of the room, the instructor, say something that, like compare the heights of lines and say, which line is taller? Which line is the same height as this other line? And so the one guy who was the real subject picked the one that was actually the same height. And all the other students picked a completely different line. And we're then arguing why it was the line, whatever. It didn't take long before that first student was like, oh yeah, I see it now. Yeah, I see it now. And agreeing with the group. And this happens. They've done it with, dental offices. Have you ever seen the one where like the people waiting in the waiting room and they get up and they stand up for no reason? They like stand up all of a sudden when a bell goes off, and then the guy's sitting there going, what are they doing? And then eventually he stands up too. He doesn't know why he's doing it. This is human beings do this. And little bitty kids do it even faster and easier. And so they win either way. Either they get your kid to do the survey or they get your kid upset with you. Mommy, I'm so embarrassed and I hate you. And why do you make me do this? Instead of putting me in, unless you have a truly exceptional child that you can talk to like a little adult, you're not having this conversation. You need to get them into some kind of other environment between those ages, or they're just a sitting duck. And so are you. Because what can happen is they can then go into school and they can cry all the time and say, my mommy's upset with me. I did the thing and you made me do this or that. And they go, oh, the parents are very controlling, are they? Maybe we need to get these social services and to talk to the parents and see what's going on with that. And next thing you know, you're on the government's radar because you're some kind of oppressive parent.
Yep. Ego Brain in the chat says, what if it is a teacher sending out an about you questionnaire and they ask things like what your pronouns are? My son had that happen. He just skipped that. Congratulations, you have SEL in your school. That's what that looks like, right? They're just sending out a survey, just asking for pronouns.
Right.
It's not a big deal.
Good on your son for skipping it.
Yeah.
You are not, now remember something. As I said at the beginning, most of school is compelled speech, right? Take the test, answer the questions when it's about their academics and their learning. But they cannot compel you to answer questions about yourself that are deeply personal or tied to your personal beliefs. If you personally believe in the biology of male and female, you don't have to have a religious attachment to that. The Supreme Court has held that things like that's why we have conscientious objectors who have said, I could not kill a person. I would rather die than kill. And that is a deeply held belief. And no, it doesn't come from my religion, but I'm a pacifist. I'm a conscientious objector. And the Supreme Court has held that that is a deeply held belief. You and your child can have deeply held beliefs in the freaking biology of sex. And if it comes to that and they go, well, I'm going to fail your child and I'm going to do this and they have to do this. Well, now you have a case and you call John O'Brien and you file the paperwork because you have a civil rights case, which is one of the practical tips that I would have given. So
what do you think, Justice?
I think that with that chat that came in, what people need to understand is that it doesn't have to be something that is attached to the government for it to qualify under the PPRA. Like Deb talked about, privilege walks. They're not attached to that, but what people need to understand is that, especially in a school district where your budget is done at an omnibus level, overall that your committees and stuff will vote on, anything that qualifies works because money is fungible. Funds are, you can't tell whether a school psychologist is doing it on your dime as the local taxpayer, the state's dime, or on the federal government's dime. If they're getting money from all of those different income sources to pay for their paycheck, you can't decide which action goes with which dollar. So what people need to understand is that even in that case, like in the chat that came in, that qualifies under the PPRA. It is, whether it's called an equity survey or not, it is. And people need to understand that even if you are, because some public employees, their salaries are accessible to the public so that they can see them. They still cannot, if you are a parent and you are a public employee, they still cannot demand your kid answer that question. How much does how much does mommy make because she is because she's a city councilor? How much does daddy make because he's a town administrator? They can't ask that. They want to go and look at their contract online that's publicly available. Good for them. They have the right to do that. They have no right to ask your kid that. They have no right to ask your kid what job your parents do. They have no right to do those things. And notice that the things that we're talking about are stuff that came up 30 and 40 years ago with bring mommy and daddy to school and tell them what their job is and what they do and what their life experiences is. They've been collecting information for over 40 years on what the general population has been doing for work, their education level, and their ability to fund themselves to get out of the public education sector. And they know that you can't leave. They know it's too big to fail. So congratulations, you're part of the system.
And that brings up an important point. What you said before, Carlin, about how, if you have extra playtime to go yell at school boards and knock yourself out. But think about the things that you should be supporting with your dollars, your time, your energy. You should be all in on school choice. Now, let me redefine what I mean. Let me give you an operational definition of school choice. I'm not talking about necessarily a voucher because the government's still going to control where you take that. Okay. I'm talking about putting pressure on your state legislature to pass some of the bills that have been proposed to let the dollars follow the kids. If you had back your education dollars, okay, you could homeschool perhaps, or you could hire a tutor, or you could put them in a little micro school, or, I'm not talking about these $50,000 a year schools. I'm talking about things that you could do, a co-op, classes at the Y, many, many things that you could do if you had that money back. It wouldn't be paying twice, okay? There are even parents I've talked to where they're like, our second income isn't so awesome. It kind of mostly pays for, childcare and extra stuff, whatever. If I had that school money back, maybe we could do without it. We could make some cuts here and there. Like, in other words, they're this close, but they don't want to pay twice. They don't want to give up those thousands of dollars. So, organize yourselves and put pressure on your legislature. Okay. Then the other thing you can do, as I said, with the older kids, is you can teach them, you can supplement, and you can get them ready to stand up for themselves in the school if that's what you want to do, so that they can practice civil disobedience. Justice.
I love how Justice raises his hand.
I know. I'm so polite.
It makes me be a teacher.
I went to public. I went to public school. So clearly you can tell. Very recently, but here's the thing. Deb brings up an important part about, money following the kids, because we had this conversation at dinner. Something that the parents need to understand is that public school is not a bank for education where you put your kids in and you get interest out of it that they can use in the real world, because we know they're not teaching them real world applicable, stuff. They don't know how to do taxes. They don't know how to do basic finance. Your kids aren't learning anything. It's not just about that, because people hear about that and it's like, oh, whatever. It's other stuff too. They're not teaching them math anymore. They're not teaching them how to read and write. Also, your kids are not piggy banks. Let me say that again. Your kids are not piggy banks. They're your babies. They are the things that you made and you wanted to make them, and they're here and you're taking care of them and you're feeding them and you have a good relationship with them. That is what matters. Just because the state puts a dollar amount on them, when you put them into a public school and you sign and you let them be enrolled, you're treating them like they're a bank account, that you put them into a place, they get filled with all this money, all this information, and that they come out better people. That's not how the system works. That's not what it was intended to do. It's not meant to give you information. It's meant to fill you up with the ideas of the government. And what you need to also understand is, again, that your kids are not currency. Stop treating them like it. Right. It's maddening to me that people, it makes sense from a fiscal standpoint to talk about them like that. But you need to understand that school districts don't just treat the kids they don't treat them like individuals. They treat them as numbers on a page that determines whether or not their school is being anti-racist or not. Yeah. That's all they care about. There's a property, a quanta that is associated with your child. It's not their qualities, it's how much they are to that district. That's all that district cares about. They're a commodity. Right. They're not a commodity for trade. I would never trade my child to go and work in a field to grow and pick corn. That's nuts. So why are you sending your kid to public school to do the same thing, but with their emotions and, their academics? That doesn't make sense. Right. So I don't know how else to say it.
They'll say right on the homepage of their websites that they're there to, help each individual child reach their full potential, blah, blah, blah. That they say that it's pure marketing. They expect you not to go farther than the homepage or the mission statement. They expect you to see that and then not read to the second paragraph where they say, in an equitable, harmonious way where everyone is equity, blah, blah, blah. So they are counting on you not understanding that is a contradiction. You cannot support each individual child and pursue equity. Well, don't go together.
And this is a really important point that I don't think people understand. Like when I was doing the stuff with HB 544, I was literally just going to the school's websites and looking at what they said on the website. They are doing this in the open, and they're trusting that parents are not taking the time to look and read about what they're doing. And I understand that reading this stuff takes time. It takes time to sift through the web pages to find where they put it. But universally, 100% of the time, it is there. It is brazen. It is out in the open. And they're doing this because they know that they can get away with it because parents don't want to see. And I want to acknowledge, I want to echo something Deb said. I understand that it creates a ton of cognitive dissonance when you you don't want to admit that your school is doing this. I totally get it. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, what is more important? Is it more important to me that my child is not, frankly ruined for the rest of their life by these
Right.
school teachers that are doing it out in the open? Or is my personal discomfort with acknowledging what the government has done, what these school systems are really trying to do, is that more important than what is happening to my child? And I just don't, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't have kids, but I sometimes get really upset that I am frankly more pissed off about this than most parents out there. Like, why am I more upset about this when I don't have children?
They don't know. A lot of them don't know. Like, we live in our bubble and we think, I mean, I was even shocked that these, well-heeled parents with Harvard degrees, MIT degrees, et cetera, and they came to this conference and they were just kind of in shock. Like, so much of what they heard was just, even when they've seen at Dalton and things like that, what's gone on, they still kind of can't really believe it. It seems so surreal. So on the one hand, we have the advantage, and that is that we make sense. We are actually objectively correct, which it's not often the case. You have sort of two sides of an argument, and you can kind of like see points on either side. Here it is clear. It's crystal clear. One side of this argument makes absolute sense, is backed up by science and facts and history and data and so many things. And one side is absolutely illogical, borderline psychotic. It's definitely psychopathic in the sense that they don't think in reality. That nothing of this is supported by reality, and they're creating a pseudo reality and a pseudo morality to go with it. So the good news is we have reality on our side, and we could present it that way. So my next practical suggestion is go in your neighborhood and in your community and start talking to your neighbors. If you're a parent, find the other parents in the class and so forth. And you've got to get rid of your fear of being, somebody slamming you in the door or not wanting to talk to you or calling you a racist. My God, if the worst thing that ever happens to you is somebody calls you a racist, you've had a good day. Okay. So the way to approach it is to say, I'm just curious. I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of what's going on in school lately with our kids. And do you agree with the racialization of the curriculum? That making race like an essential part of every lesson is going to help the kids learn? Do you think that's a good idea? And put it that way, racialization. Don't say CRT. Say the racialization of the curriculum. And they say, do you think it's really right that our kids should be having to answer personal, deep questions about their psychology and us and their home and about our family? Do you think that's a good thing? And when you start to get the parents, some parents will be like, they're doing what? What do you mean? And then be ready with some evidence. Yeah, so there's this, and I found on the website and that and the other, and you will probably be amazed. There are people who probably pick up the phone and go, get over here, and you might build like a little coalition in your living room of local parents who are like, hell no, because they just don't know. They're navigating COVID and, they're going to lose their job tomorrow or whatever because of the thing. And that's another thing I want to say is that this is all connected. This is all connected. So even, people, as Carlin said, like, she's more upset about this, and she has every right to be. She's a taxpayer. She's paying for this. These are the kids who are going to grow up and run her country when she's, older. These are the people who are going to be voting for the office holders who make decisions about her life. So we all have a stake in this. We may not have literal skin in the game, but we all have a stake in this. And everyone, it's all hands on deck to fix this, because this is our society. We saw last summer who was burning down cities, and it wasn't 40 and 50-year-olds, okay? So this is what we're dealing with, is we're creating a generation of kids who are worst case chronic depressives, best case, they're chronic depressives, worst case, they're psychopathic, they're sociopaths, they're antisocial, they're borderline personality disorder, they're narcissistic personality disorder, and possibly malignantly so, which is scary. And you really don't want any more narcissists in America. I think we have enough of them. Go spend time on Twitter. So this, that sort of thing is like, get with your neighbors, talk to them about what's going on with your kids. And maybe you find 5 or 6 people, you guys can homeschool together and cut the cost, but it's all connected. Why are there these authoritarian thug-like people running around telling you what's best for you and your health and your family? Why are there people who literally are perfectly fine with you kicking the bucket rather than keeping your job? Yeah. Being homeless. The same people are like, oh, the homeless and the poor and the this and the that. But you didn't make the same life choices I made. You can go sleep under a bridge for all I care and take your little children with you. I mean, seriously, this is connected. This authoritarian, my club and team is more right and virtuous than your club and team. and they're so certain of their own virtue that they're making absolutely barbaric decisions about other human beings. And these are adults who didn't have this since kindergarten. They've had this only college forward. That's it. College. Because you don't see too many of these people who are pushing this who are just high school diploma. I'm not saying there aren't any, but you see it in the elite. You see it in the moneyed and the people with influence, and that's from college. Imagine when they get it from kindergarten all the way up.
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it.
Justice, anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add other than, these children that are getting brought up like this, I'm only 23, but here's the reality is that those kindergartners that are going in right now, either I'm going to be working with them or I'm going to be employing them someday. I mean, for me, whatever's about to happen, like you two are it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out for you. But for me, I'm gonna see so much of this. And I, quite frankly, and feel bad about being born in the 1990s now because I really don't want to be this old and dealing with this. I'd rather be in my 40s and my 50s because I want this to end sooner. But people need to understand that this is not, we are playing with fire. These people are playing with fire, and we have to.
It's not ending anything.
This is not going to be solved in our lifetime.
No. And Carlin, you've said before on your channel as an organizational psychologist that you have seen team cohesion in the workplace fall apart because of DEI trainings, just DEI trainings. Yeah. Now, imagine you've already got, in some middle schools, especially like a Lord of the Flies atmosphere before all this, because of just the nature of school and the dumbing down of the curriculum. And because guys, I hate to break it to you, but this stuff only became possible because they dumbed down the academics for so many years that our kids are borderline illiterate. They don't know any history. They don't know enough of general knowledge or culture. So it's much easier to feed them all of these bogus ideas and Marxism and anti-individualism because they don't know any different. They think America's a terrible place. They read Howard Zinn. So the team cohesion breaks down in adults after a single DEI training. If people get mistrustful and wonder if how should I talk to you now that I'm worried about microaggressions? Imagine you're marinating in this for 13 years. And on top of that, they are seeing the graduates that have come out in the last couple of years who've gone through more years of this. And employers are saying they're a nightmare because every little tiny slight goes to HR. Immediately to HR. It's not like we have a conversation over coffee and we hash it out, or we just ignore it and move on with our day like mature, well-adjusted adults. It's, I'm going to HR, I'm going to get you fired. And that is what we're dealing with.
And I started seeing this before the pandemic because I was working with a lot of organizations that had very young staff, and I would go in and I would do coaching with their young staff. First of all, they don't know how to write. They don't know how to read. They can barely even do the basic functions of their job. And these are people who have graduated from college, let alone high school. High school graduates used to be able to do the things that these college graduates were not capable of doing. But Deb is 100% correct. Every single thing was a microaggression. Every single thing was a personal slight. There was this mob mentality of if there's one person that's not conforming to the group, then we need to get that person out, and we need to form little cancel mobs within our organization to try to convince the boss to fire this one person because we don't like them and they're not doing the things that we want them to do. And this was a couple of years ago when I was doing more of this work than I am now because I'm doing more of this stuff right now. But it was this is a goddamn nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is.
We are
going to see people, first of all, the pandemic is already bad enough and it was already going to cause mental health problems enough. But then you add this social emotional learning stuff onto it. We're going to see an entire generation with increased rates of depression, increased anxiety. I think we're going to see a massive increase in personality disorders. We're already seeing that kids barely know how to talk to each other because they're all having these quiet lunches. So they don't, and even when the teachers or the parents are trying to get them to speak to each other, they don't want to do it. They just pick up their phone and they get on their phone. And by the way, anytime you're on your phone, and I'll even do a little demonstration, and you're hunched over like this because you have your phone in front of you and your shoulders are hunched, that's going to increase your rates of depression, because contracted body language over an extended period of time is eventually going to have an impact on what's going on in your brain. They've seen this with young girls, where girls who, especially when you see the girls with their sleeves pulled down over their hands, those are girls that are going to have issues with depression and anxiety and low self-esteem and all of these things, because how we carry ourselves leads to how we feel about ourselves.
100%.
So we are
they're getting literal hunchbacks too.
Oh yeah, they really
they're
are.
getting literal. Have you ever seen the teenage girls? They've got like a little like widow's hump.
Yep.
And sometimes that will be permanent. You might not be able to fix that. They're getting repetitive motion things. They have sleep problems. The cortisol is through the roof. Weight gain, of course, because of cortisol. And what cortisol does too, if you have too much in your system, is it impairs your judgment in general.
Yep.
Because your body thinks that, that it's in this constant state of emergency, and you can end up with adrenal fatigue, which causes all kinds of hormonal disturbances. And I mean, I'm saying this even from a point of my own self. Like, I am immersed in this by studying it, and I have this weird kind of like strange feelings by proxy, kind of reading about the kids going through it, reading the parents' testimonials, watching the lesson plans and the trainings unfold. And it keeps you up nights. I mean, it causes me stress just studying it. I cannot imagine. And I know what it is, and I know it's toxic, and I know, but imagine like, that you wouldn't do drugs, but hang out with drug users all day. It takes a toll. And our kids are in this environment, like just sitting there all day long. And then they come home and you think, well, I'll supplement, or I'll talk to them, or we'll engage around the dinner table. They're not going to engage with you.
No,
they don't trust you. And if you think like, well, Deb, why? Is because you put them there. Look, my two eldest were homeschooled till they had to go into school. My youngest wasn't. She had to go to kindergarten. But even knowing the fact of the matter was, I legally could not pull them out. I was precluded by law from doing it, because you have to both agree, and we didn't. And even knowing that I had no choice, my kids were like, why are you doing this to us? Why are you taking where we are miserable? They'd get in the car every day after school and just like, and sit in the back of the car. And my middle daughter would put headphones on. She's like, can I listen to music? And she would like just be like this all the way home. My youngest would get so frustrated with little things. She would kick the back of the seat as I'm driving. There were multiple times I had to pull the car over, get out of the car, take her out of the car, and calm her down, because something would set her off. She, like she'd move her notebook too close to my other daughter. You're touching me. Stop touching me. And I mean, people laugh about that and they think it's a joke. But part of why their boundaries got hyper sensitive to like, don't come in my space. Don't talk to me. Don't touch me. Don't hug me. Is because all day they had their boundaries violated. If you are around people who've had their boundaries violated, they're like twitchy. They have like a PTSD kind of a thing, that even though you mean them no harm and you want to love them or whatever, they're like this. Your kids have a kind of a shell shock. It's a version. It's like a little mini version of it, and extend that across all the days. If your child is neurodiverse, magnify it. If your child has sensory issues, magnify it. If your kid is really, really bright, magnify it. If your kid is not really bright because they have learning disabilities, the tiny sliver of kids who do okay is like, they're like unicorns. There are so few who can just navigate this, and they've got the wherewithal and, whatever, it's got strong boundaries. They exist. They're out there. Then one of them might even be your child. So you might be hearing this and going, I don't know, my kid's fine. And that may be true. But if you sat down and talked to them, they might tell you like, oh yeah, they're whack. Like, my teachers are idiots. I'm not learning anything. And I just think they're a bunch of morons. So your best case there is, I guess, they get through it psychologically, but they think adults are idiots.
Yeah. Justice.
No, I wanna agree with what Deb is saying, because the same school district that I became a school committee member of was the same district that I school choiced out of. And when I was in those board meetings, I was perked up. You can probably see it on the video. I'm perked up. I'm looking for all my stuff. And it's not because I want to. I was exhausted after those meetings because I did not even though I was a board member and not being subjected to the same things, I remembered being back in school. I remembered how things were, but I also could feel just the tension of what I needed to do. And I just felt so closed off because I'm only 23. People need to remember that. I was only 22 when I was really serving. So I'm closed off. I felt very, much like I was being violated. And on the last meeting, when I knew that there was the potential because I had an interview for a job and I knew that I needed to make this decision if I needed to leave or not, my body language completely changed. I was slumped. I just didn't care. I was pretty open. I wasn't crossing so much. And that's when the board members, some of the ones on the side conversations, there's a little bit more action because I was relaxed, because subconsciously I already made up my mind that I'm like, I'm getting out of here. Like, I did not sign up to go back to high school again. I hated high school. I hated middle school. I hated kindergarten. Okay. I just don't. When I tell people that this is bad, and when I tell people that it's not a good situation, when I tell people that school committees are like high school all over again, I mean it in every possible sense of the term. I mean it in terms of the emotional manipulation. I mean it in terms of the violations that you feel. For the people who are desensitized, God bless you. Good for you. But for those of us who can understand and can feel it, it sucks and it's not fun because we just want to be our own individual selves and we do not at all costs want to play your game. We don't want to. And we want to have our own thoughts and opinions that people aren't walking around in and trying to change and mess with everything. I don't know. It brings me back to a bad place.
You guys read Fountainhead, right? You read Fountainhead? Okay. So anybody who follows Carlin or is then, well,
you need to, Justice. It's so good.
It's so good. And what I've been saying lately is you need to find your inner Howard Rourke.
Yeah.
You really need to understand that in the end, the bullies, there are a lot of hot air. Okay. There's Ellsworth Tuohy's out there all over the place. He's a character who's kind of like, at one point he says to Howard Rourke, he says, tell me, Mr. Rourke, as he's looking, like everything you ever did is going to be gone and destroyed and I've destroyed you, whatever. And he's like, tell me, what do you think of me? And he says, I don't think of you. And walks away. And it's very powerful because you realize how much power there is in simply not caring what they think of you and what they're going to do. And the best thing you could do for your child is get rid of that. Like I said, get in touch with how much you really want for your kid in terms of their education and set aside all the other peer pressures and concerns and all that junk that from your high school days, perhaps, that's left over, and stand up tall and just say, they can call me names. Be a role model. They can call you racist. They can slam doors in your face. They can say, I'm going to call your place of business and say what a bad person you are. But remember, we're not talking about you going to a school board meeting going, CRT, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about you sitting with your neighbors and saying, I don't see how it helps them read better to make everything about race. I mean, it's important for us not to be racist. I totally agree with that. And I don't want anybody to be racist. But I mean, did we have a really big problem with racism in our district? Which is something, by the way, you can file an FOIA request with your school to ask about, them to ask them to send you the evidence of all the racist incidents that happened in the school that prompted the hiring of the DEI director, because surely there must be so many racist incidents or racist teachers in the past 10 years for them to decide this was a racist school. And you'll be interested to find out they don't have any such things. But you can have those conversations. I'm very curious and concerned. Oh, definitely. Yes. But I just don't see how that helps them read. And I'm really concerned about math too, because, I haven't seen my kid do their multiplication tables. Keep it to the things that are bad and build a coalition that way. And there's enough bad there. The national report card, guys, when they tell you that 33% of the kids can read, they're saying that 33% of the kids are average. And they already set the what they consider the definition of average is what you and I would consider below average. Okay. Proficient is what is even smaller than 30%. It's tiny, it's single digits. And that's what you and I would consider sufficient.
It's funny.
It's so important to understand that.
this is something I've been thinking about a lot, because when I was younger, I was a reader. I was reading several grade levels ahead of whatever grade I was in. I was reading all the time. I would read books at home. I would bring the books I was reading at home to school. And I have distinct memories in middle school of when I would be like reading a book, just like doing my thing, and my teacher would demand that I stop reading the book and would actually take it away from me, or I actually got detention for reading books. And I never understood that. I was like, why don't you want people to be reading? I'm in school. Isn't reading good? And now like on this end of it, I truly understand that the answer is they don't want you reading the books unless they give you the thing to read.
Yep. That's exactly right. And I mean, my daughter had to ask, and I had to write a note for her in 9th grade asking for her to read her own book for a major reading assignment, because the list of books that was given to her was all struggle literature and dystopian horror junk. Okay. And they also are trying to, if they can't immerse your kids in struggle literature and victim consciousness stuff, then they want to immerse them in this dystopian, nightmarish scenarios and porn. Okay. This is about the demoralization of our society. The KGB, the guy from the KGB in the 80s talked about it. That when you demoralize people, you make them much easier to control, because they lose hope. They have depression. They don't know why. That's the other thing. They don't know why they feel so shitty. So, that's what they're doing. When I say they, every time you hear me say they and they're doing and that, I'm talking about people who set standards way above your teacher. So if you want to go and have a heart-to-heart with the individual teacher, and maybe you find that the individual teacher is a little bit of a rabble rouser too, and just wants to know that you support them, if you can get that group of your neighbors together and there's 5 or 6 of you, and you approach the teacher in good faith, give her the benefit, him or her, whatever, the benefit of the doubt, and say, hey, I don't know how you feel about this stuff, but we parents are sincerely concerned, and here's why. And you give them your reasons, and you calmly to them, face to face, and ask them out for coffee, ask them to sit down, have a conversation, and say, like, we're sincerely concerned, and we imagine that you would be concerned too about our kids like coming away feeling bad about themselves and not really learning the material, right? And if you get the like, well, okay, well, game on. Game on. Now you know that there literally is no hope, okay? But if they sit there and go, just between us, I hate this garbage. If they're Frank McCormick in, disguise, they haven't gotten up the gumption to be Frank yet, and they're just like, oh my God, I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm just so afraid of losing my job. I'm new here. I've only been here 2 years. I actually think this is crazy. I went through an alternative pathway to get my certificate, not through the teacher ed program, and I'm just like aghast that this is what I have to teach. Can you help me? It's a possibility. I don't want to get your hopes up, because these people are few and far between, but they do exist. And a lot of them don't think they have your support because they see the screaming at the school board meeting.
Yeah.
So you can start there and document everything. Document if you can record it, say, do you mind if we record this? Like, we won't share our name. We won't do anything with it unless we have to, whatever. And then see what reaction you get.
Yeah. You just said something really important, is that if you're going to take this tactic, you've got to take a softer approach. You can't take the teacher out for coffee and then yell at them, because it doesn't, like, it just doesn't work. And again, like, I think every single person here would understand why you're angry, and God knows I like doing a good rant. But, people don't understand. They see things on YouTube, and they see people doing these great rants because, frankly, that's what gets the clicks and the likes on YouTube. But in real life, I suspect all 3 of us are very, very different when we are handling a one-on-one or small group conversation. You have to apply the soft skills. You have to kind of take your own personal anger out of it. You have to, be inquisitive, be curious. I love some of the questions Deb's asking, like, are you okay with this? Do not talk about politics under any circumstances. You have got to focus in on exactly what's going on right in front of you.
Right. Aim small, miss small.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, we've been going for over 2 hours. I feel like we've covered a ton of topics. I obviously need to have you both on my channel much, much more and more regular, so that like we can continue talking about this, because like even within this conversation, there's just so much to break down. It's just like this is the most terrifying reality that I think we're facing in this entire like anti-woke, unwoke fight that's going on is what's going on with the public schools. I used to, even just like 2 years ago, I was completely in favor of public schooling. I was like, school teachers need what they need to educate. We should make sure no, the public schools need to burn. And I don't mean literally, I mean figuratively. Everyone needs to take their kids out of the public schools. Like, I've gotten very accelerationist in this regard because it is not a fixable problem. All we can do is mitigate, but like it is not fixable. So do you guys have any closing thoughts?
I have one. And that is, you mentioned Gabrielle already, but I've committed to making a plug every chance I get, because she's not getting foundation money, you guys. She's not getting money from the organizations that raise money to defend education, all this. And I don't know why. I think some of it has to do with some of these groups. Some of these groups want, well, yes, and I know too, actually, but I'm gonna hypothesize that they want to control her and the money and the narrative and the things and the stuff. And she is a Spitfire. By the way, in case you guys do not know, Rosa Parks died penniless and in pain. So we all talk about her as a hero, but people of the day who raised money on her back and for the cause didn't give any of it to her. So she stuck her neck out and she put herself in the front of that bus and drew all the attention. But, the media was not her friend. The people, even the NAACP, didn't take care of her in her old age when she couldn't work and she couldn't get any kind of medical care. She died penniless and alone. When people do this and they stick their neck out and their family members do this and go up against the system and go up against very powerful people on all sides, by the way, it's not any one political party. They make themselves virtually unemployable. In her case, she's already disabled, so that's another issue. It is extraordinarily expensive, not just for the lawyers and the cost, but you've got travel expenses, food. You can't work, you can't go to school. There are all kinds of expenses just to fight this fight, and yet she's sitting on a case with such a good chance of prevailing. We're talking like, Brown v. Board of Education level chance of succeeding. So I'm trying to appeal to the general public, because they could raise millions of dollars to give to a such and such organization organized for the free of the blah, 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 blah. Okay. And they're going to give it to their people. They're paying their people, or they're paying to make glossy videos and pretty, content. So you learn all about the problems. You guys gathered here know the problem's the problem. You don't need to go to their website to learn more about how the problem's the problem. Spread it around to your friends that this case deserves our support, because this is landmark stuff right here. And we need to support people who bring this. And likewise, support small creators. Support Carlin, me, Justice, anybody out there, people who are not aligned with a think tank, not aligned with a giant corporation. Some of us, not me, but I know some others possibly here present, I don't know, maybe, have been approached to go under other banners and have said no, because then you would be owned. You're owned. They tell you what your brand is going to be. They tell you what you can say, what you can't say. And why do they do that? Because they don't want competition. All the money they raise, all the money they pull in from the content they produce, they pretty much keep. And it keeps going in a circle. Okay. When we produce this content for you guys, it just supports our existence. Like, it just supports the ability to create the content. And if we had extra, we sure as hell would be giving it to Gabrielle. I can tell you that right. Every time I have $5 left over, I throw it her way, because we're all here trying to actually solve the problem, not just create a brand on the back of the problem.
Yeah. And wait,
that's for real.
No, and I love that you brought this up, Deb. I put the link in the chat, but it's givesendgo.com/support the Clarks. Please give money to this lawsuit. And I'm gonna be really, really blunt about this. Like, because a lot of people have asked, like, why aren't organizations like FAIR funding this lawsuit? Well, what you guys really need to know and understand about all these organizations that have popped up is there is a reason that there are independent creators that are not attached to them, because what these organizations do is they take on like small little bits of lawsuits, and what they're trying to get the lawsuit to do is to settle.
Yep.
Gabrielle Clark does not want to settle this lawsuit, but the organizations that raise all this money and have all these bands of lawyers to support these lawsuits, they're trying to get settlements, because then what they do is they use the settlements to raise money for the organization. They said, we successfully stewarded this lawsuit. They didn't successfully steward anything. Gabrielle Clark wants to fight to a legal precedent on this lawsuit. She has gone through several legal teams because they're all being funded by these organizations who just want to convince her to settle, and she refuses. The only way, well, I shouldn't say the only way, but like, this lawsuit will succeed if it has the money to do so. If this lawsuit fails, it will likely be because it does not have the money to do so. And no conservative influencers or any of these people are raising money for this case. Why? Because they're playing pranks on AOC's grandmother. That is deemed more important than funding a landmark lawsuit. So please, I have to just really echo everything Deb says. This is the case that we need to support. So givesendgo.com/support the Clarks. I put the link in the chat. I've already personally donated over $1,000 to this. I have offered to match any donations up to $500 from blue check conservative influencers. If they donated $500, I would match them. And guys, by the way, I'm not in like a financial position where I just have like $500 to throw around for every blue check influencer. That's how seriously I take this. Not a single one of them. 0 blue check influencers have taken me up on that offer. So we need to do it ourselves. If we believe in it, it's important. Please give what you can, even if it's just $5. $5 is still important.
Right. Thank you. That was my big thing that I would say.
Justice, any closing words?
My closing words are that some of the reasons why I shared some of my thoughts and feelings on this particular show today is to make people understand that there is a toll and there's a price to pay in this particular battle and in this particular situation that we find ourselves in, whether we recognize that it started 40 or 50 years ago or not. People need to understand that the actions that they're taking today are going to, I'm going to live long enough to see it, and it's not going to be pretty. And people need to also understand that it is just, this system is not, I was already somebody that wasn't a fan of the public school systems, who had already been subjected and watched some things. I went from being, a kindergartner that the school committee had to make a vote on, to a school choice kid, to a kid that had to, other thing too, is that I went before a school committee when I was 17, challenged them on a teacher that they weren't dealing with publicly. And then I had to, but before that happened, I strategically maneuvered that I got pulled out of that class and put into an online class and had to do ELA that way. People need to understand that unless you have children like me who experience all of this ridiculousness just to get a good public education, if your child isn't somebody like me or somebody like Gabrielle Clark's son, you need to really consider pulling them, because first of all, not every child is supposed to be like us. Not every child is supposed to be their own advocate, that's supposed to go before a school board meeting, supposed to go before in a landmark case lawsuit that could possibly go to the Supreme Court. No child is supposed to experience that. That is unheard of, it's unusual, and it's completely out of the norm for expectations. You need to recognize that you are not Superman and that you never will be. You need to recognize that your power comes from your individuality, and you need to recognize that you are the only agent that can control this situation where it stands right now. I don't care if they go after homeschooling. I really don't, because if they want to, they're going to anyway. But at least we'll know what their next move is. We don't know what their next move is because we're still trapped in the same cycle. We've done happy hour for weeks on Dr. B's channel, and things haven't changed. It's the same thing over and over again. No offense, but it's really the same thing over and over again. Until we make a drastic move as civilians and we work grassroots on the ground and make these little coalitions of angry moms who have phone lists, who talk to each other and say, we're all going to pull out and we are going to figure out this childcare situation together and do it together. If we don't care anymore, then nothing is going to change. You have power in numbers. Stop working alone. there are strategies that we're going to talk about hopefully in the future on my channel and in my locals that you can use to partner together and to get out of this. But that's all I really have to say.
Well, thank you both for such an amazing chat. I really encourage everyone watching, please join all of our locals. The locals information is in the description below. I will tell you that I am a member of both Deb's and Justice's locals. They're members of my locals. We basically trade subscriptions, and then locals gets a cut for being like,
Yes.
you know, the platform that's hosting us all. So we want to provide gratitude for that and everything Dave Rubin and his team is doing, because it's the only place where we can have authentic engagement and not be censored for what we're saying on the internet. So please join our locals. Please also make sure you subscribe to Deb and Justice's YouTube channel. I put the information in the description for that as well. If you're not a member of my channel or a subscriber to my channel, I hope I have convinced you to subscribe today. Please double check. If you think you're subscribed, you know, YouTube may have made that decision for you. So just give it a quick double check for me, and make sure you're still subscribed. Give it a thumbs up. We got a couple other amazing live streams coming up this week. Tomorrow, obviously, I will be live with Joshua for our regular Tuesday stream at 9:30 p.m. It's a fun show called Nothing Remotely Controversial. It's a little bit lighthearted, but, you know, we have fun with it. On Wednesday, I'm going to have Alu on my channel, who is spearheading the New Hampshire secession movement. So we're going to hear about why my home state of New Hampshire may be the state that will secede from the Union. I'm very excited about this.
I hope
and
it
then
does.
I fingers crossed, man. And then on Thursday, we have Frank McCormick, Chalkboard Heresy himself, coming on. And I'm sure he'll echo a lot of the things that Deb and Justice have said, but we'll talk more about that on Thursday. All right, guys, that's all we have for this time. Thank you for spending some time with us. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.